I chilling in my room like any normal Tuesday, when a beam of light blasted through my ceiling like God forgot to turn off his flashlight. Congratulations, you've been selected for the horror game. Teleportation in 5 minutes. Cool. Cool, cool, cool. Totally fine. I've only been dreading this moment for 20 years. See, I'm not originally from this world. I got ice-guyed here as a baby 2 decades ago, and the whole time I was waiting for my cheat system to show up. You know, the standard transmigrator starter pack. But nope, 20 years of nothing. Meanwhile, this world has its own little problem. Every year, a spooky game randomly kidnaps 100,000 people, and almost nobody comes back. People tried fighting it at first, but eventually everyone just went, more people die in car crashes anyway, and moved on. Humanity is wild. So I called my mom. Not for some emotional goodbye. I told her to watch Dad's blood sugar. Priorities, people. I grabbed a backpack, threw in some water and instant noodles, because apparently you can bring stuff into the game, just not weapons. Can't even sneak in a fruit knife. The game is basically airport security, but worse. Then, with literally 1 minute left on the clock, guess what finally decides to show up? My system. 20 years late. Oh hey, binding in progress. 10%. 30%. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to file a complaint with the transmigration department. You had 2 decades, and you pick now? While I'm about to get yeeted into a death game. But okay, it was loading fast. 100% done, with seconds to spare. Maybe this could still work, and then everything went to hell. The horror game and my system started fighting inside my head. Like 2 apps trying to install at the same time and crashing my whole brain. I heard something about data conflict, force takeover, and talent extraction, all mashed together like a blender full of error messages. Then, pop, lights out. Gone. I woke up with the worst headache of my life, ears ringing like I'd been standing next to a speaker at a metal concert. And where was I? Not the cute little white room the survivors always described. No, no, no. I was sitting in some crumbling stone chamber that looked like a medieval ruin had a baby with a cave. There was a stone throne covered in weird carvings, rotting wood all over the floor, and holes in the ceiling showing gray, depressing sky. System? I called out hopefully. Nothing. System, dead silence. My billion-dollar cheat code got bodied by a horror game. Absolutely incredible. Speedrun to uselessness. But wait, I remembered hearing something about a talent right before I blacked out. So I pulled up my status panel and it was bizarre. SSS rank talent. Bones of the Ancient Tomb. Sounds metal as heck, not gonna lie. But then the rest of my panel looked like someone glued a city-building game onto a horror game. I had a territory, rated F, on the verge of collapse. My buildings were all ruins. My resources were in the negatives. And my entire population? 1 skeleton strategist and 2 skeleton foot soldiers. I'm not running a kingdom. I'm running a graveyard with middle management. This had my dead-on-arrival system written all over it. The thing called itself Homeland Lord System. So of course it gave me a Lord's territory. A garbage Lord's territory, but still. Before I could even process how thoroughly scammed I was, I heard a rattling noise behind me. Clack, clack, clack. Like someone shaking a bag of dice, except the dice were bones. And then a deep voice said, "My lord, you've finally arrived." I turned around. It was a skeleton. My employee orientation had begun. I turned around and nearly jumped out of my skin. A full-on skeleton was walking toward me, blue ghost flames flickering in its empty eye sockets, wearing raggedy clothes, carrying a beat-up notebook like some undead accountant. "Stay back," I yelled, and it actually stopped. Just stood there, jaw clacking open and shut, going, "My lord, the territory is in bad shape. May I give you a report?" After 3 seconds of staring, my brain caught up. Oh, right. This is my population, my skeleton strategist, Ajuan. A walking pile of bones with middle management energy. I sat down on the stone throne, because hey, might as well look the part, and told him to go ahead. He opened his notebook, cleared his throat. "How? You're literally just bones," and gave me the most depressing financial report of all time. Population, 3 skeletons. Him, plus 2 skeleton soldiers named Xiao Zhang and Xiao Wang. Buildings, 1 crumbling palace, 1 dried-up well. Resources, negative 1,000 EN energy. And, he flipped the notebook shut, that's it, negative 1,000. I didn't just start from 0, I started in debt. in a horror game, with skeleton employees. The notebook spelled it out nice and clear. Pay off this debt within 7 days or the territory gets deleted and the Lord, that's me, gets erased from existence. So my cheat system didn't give me superpowers. It gave me a mortgage with a death clause. The well produces 20 energy per day, but daily upkeep costs 50. So I'm still sinking deeper every single day. Azuin mentioned I could also collect energy by entering the Shadow Realm, which turned out to just be a fancy skeleton word for the horror game's dungeon. We walked outside to check out my grand kingdom. A weed-covered stone plaza, one rickety well with a rain shelter. Why do skeletons care about rain? And beyond that, a field of graves. 2 little skeletons were peeking out from behind a tombstone like scared puppies. Those were my elite military forces, Xiao Zhang and Xiao Wang. They ran over and immediately face-planted into a full kneel. I told them to get up fast because I was genuinely worried they'd fall apart and I'd lose 60% of my army. Azuin side-eyed them, scribbled something in his notebook. I caught a peek. Xiao Zhang and Xiao Wang. First meeting with Lord, performance, poor. This guy was doing employee reviews. Then he led me to a glowing blue portal floating near the graves. Above it, a timer read, dungeon starts in 1 hour 55 minutes. So yeah, confirmed. I'm still stuck in the horror game. The Shadow Realm is just the game's dungeon with a spooky rebrand. And I've got less than 2 hours to figure out how to not die in there while also somehow paying off my skeleton mortgage. 20 years waiting for a cheat system, and all it gave me was crippling debt and 3 bony co-workers. So Azuin told me the good news. Pretty much everything in the dungeon carries energy, and I just need to bring stuff back. Sounds easy, right? Like grocery shopping but spooky. While waiting for the dungeon to open, I went to check out my well, my only working building, my pride and joy. I leaned over the edge, peered into the foggy bottomless pit, and thought, nothing special. Then the well sighed at me. A full, tired, dramatic sigh, like it was disappointed in its new landlord. I looked at Azuin. Azuin shrugged. Apparently, the well has been sighing since forever, and nobody knows why. Multiple lords have tried talking to it. No response. Just vibes. Speaking of previous lords, I got nosy and asked what happened to the last guy. Azuin flipped open his notebook to the relevant page, and I read what was basically a skeleton obituary. The previous lord had marched into the dungeon shouting about conquering everything, borrowed 200 energy from Azuin before leaving, promised to pay double when he got back, and was never seen again. I asked if his debt would transfer to me. Azuin said no. I have never felt more relieved about a dead man's unpaid loans. Then I finally remembered to actually read my skills instead of panicking. Skill 1. Bones among dust. All dead things in dungeons start neutral toward me, meaning ghosts and monsters won't attack me on sight. That's basically an invisibility cloak, but for the undead. Skill 2. Summon skeleton. I can teleport my territory's residents to my location. So I can yank Xiao Zhang and Xiao Wang into the dungeon as bodyguards. And they passively absorb energy just by existing nearby. 50 points each, no effort required. Walking piggy banks made of bones. Meanwhile, Azuin was silently taking notes behind me the whole time. I didn't notice until later, but he'd written stuff like, new lord inspected territory. Seems unhappy, and stared at soldiers with worry in his eyes. Combatability, unknown. Survival chances, unknown. My own strategist was writing my obituary in advance. Real confidence booster. The portal timer hit 0. A message popped up. Enter within 1 minute or die. Classic. I told Azuin to hold down the fort and stepped through. I woke up on a creepy old bus. Flickering yellow lights, black windows showing nothing outside, and the lovely smell of mildew. 3 other passengers sat scattered ahead of me. The intercom crackled. Bus 444, next stop, South City Tower. The dungeon info appeared. Death bus, D rank. Survive until the last stop. Bonus task. Help passengers with their problems. And one little warning. When you make eye contact with IT, trouble finds you. Simple enough. Just sit tight. Don't stare at anything creepy. Ride to the end. But then I glanced at the seat cover next to me, and a tooltip popped up. Old seat cover. 15 energy points. The entire bus was made of collectible loot. I came to survive a horror dungeon and accidentally walked into an IKEA clearance sale for ghosts. Forget the dungeon mission. Forget the points. I had one priority and one priority only: stripping this bus naked for energy before the ride ended. My territory debt wasn't going to pay itself, and every seat cover on this haunted jalopy was worth 15 points of sweet, sweet ghost juice. Problem was, I couldn't just start ripping upholstery in plain sight like some unhinged bus vandal. So I summoned Xiao Zhang and Xiao Wang, my elite skeleton squad, and parked them in the row in front of me as a living, well, unliving privacy screen. Those two knuckleheads appeared doing a full celebration dance, jaw-clacking and arm-flailing like they'd just won the skeleton lottery. Turns out the bus had way more energy in the air than our broke territory, and they were basically hyperventilating with joy. Back home, after Ajuin took his 15 daily points from the well, those two split 5 between them. Here, every breath was an all-you-can-eat buffet. I shut them up real quick. Stop moving, or I'm sending you back. Instant freeze. Beautiful obedience. What I didn't know was that my little skeleton stunt had absolutely terrorized the other passengers. Some poor guy named Zhao Yixiao, first-timer like me, had glanced back at exactly the wrong moment and watched 2 skeletons materialize out of thin air next to me. Then when I ducked down to work on the seat covers, he looked again and saw the skeletons had moved closer, staring right at him, while the human behind them had vanished. This man was 100% convinced I'd been eaten alive. Meanwhile, my 2 boneheads were actually having a conversation about him. Xiao Zhang elbowed Xiao Wang like, "See? Told you he'd look again. Good thing I made you scoot over, or he would have spotted the boss." They were running a coordinated cover operation and genuinely proud of themselves. The bus driver noticed 2 skeletons boarding without paying, but decided it wasn't his problem. His paycheck stayed the same either way. Honestly, respect. So while every other player on this bus was frozen in terror, debating whether to attempt the bonus mission of helping passengers with their problems, I was on my hands and knees discovering that seat covers have zippers. Game changer. First one came off clean, 15 points, straight into the backpack. I looked at the remaining seats like a wolf eyeing a flock of sheep. So many covers. So little time. I was going to strip this bus down to the frame. I'd just moved to my next target when the bus slowed down. South City Tower, passengers please exit. Boarding passengers, pay your fare, or face the consequences. Both doors hissed open. Outside, a creepy skyscraper glowed with scattered lights, and I could faintly hear screaming. 2 shadowy figures stepped out from the station and climbed aboard. A coin clanked into the fare box. I looked up to see who just joined the party. The 2 new passengers looked disappointingly normal. Just tired office workers in wrinkled suits, the kind of guys who fall asleep on public transport because their boss made them stay until midnight. One leaned back and closed his eyes. The other kept his head down like he was napping. Except he wasn't napping. I caught him secretly scanning everyone on the bus. This dude was shopping for victims. Then our eyes met. My stomach dropped. The dungeon tip literally said eye contact equals trouble. I braced myself for something horrible, but the guy just looked away. Didn't approach me, didn't transform, nothing. He just mumbled, "Since when does this city of skeletons?" and went back to pretending to sleep. My bones among dust skill had just saved my life by making me register as not interesting to a literal ghost. Best passive ability ever. So I went right back to my real job, seat cover removal specialist. Meanwhile, some guy named Li Xiaoyu a few rows up was having a crisis. Second-time player, apparently learned from chat forums that only doing the basic, survive, mission was a slow death sentence. 10 measly points buys you nothing useful, and without upgrades, future dungeons would eat him alive. He'd blown 8 of his previous points on a paper talisman and had 1 big knife in storage. He was eyeing the office workers, debating whether to take the bonus mission. He debated too long. Office worker number 2, the sneaky one, teleported right behind him without making a single sound. No footsteps, no breathing, nothing. Just suddenly there, hovering behind Li Xiaoyu's neck like a broken puppet dangling from invisible strings. "You seem very interested in watching me," Li Xiaoyu screamed and slammed into the window, so hard I heard it from the back row. I peeked through the gap between my skeleton bodyguards and saw the full picture. A hanging ghost floating in midair, neck twisted sideways, face turning purple. I watched for about 2 seconds, confirmed it wasn't my problem, and went back to unzipping my next seat cover. The ghost guilt-tripped Li Xiaoyu into accepting a task, find his lost hanging rope somewhere along the bus route. Couldn't remember which stop he'd left it at. And if Li Xiaoyu failed, he'd have to stay on this bus forever, keeping the ghost company until someone else found it instead. Li Xiaoyu agreed so fast he nearly swallowed his own tongue. The ghost smiled warmly and said, "I knew I picked the right person," which is the scariest sentence anyone has ever said on public transportation. I folded another seat cover into my backpack. Another 15 points secured. Honestly, being boring and invisible was the greatest superpower in this entire horror game. Everyone else was getting traumatized while I was running a one-man upholstery recycling business in the back row. So while I was busy running my one-man bus demolition service in the back row, the drama up front was absolutely spectacular. I had a front row seat. Well, technically a back row seat, to watch everyone else's terrible life choices unfold through the gaps between my skeleton bodyguards. First up, Li Xiaoyu and his rope hunting adventure. The bus pulled into the second stop, and this poor guy actually got off the bus to search for the hanging ghost's missing rope. Alone, in the dark, on a haunted bus route. The courage to brain cells ratio on this man was truly something special. I watched him through the window, or tried to, anyway, since the windows were basically just panels of pure darkness with occasional smudges of light. From what I could piece together, the bus stop was nothing fancy. A couple of benches, a rain shelter, a trash can. Li Xiaoyu was scrambling around like a man looking for his car keys in a parking lot. Except the keys were a ghost's suicide rope, and the parking lot wanted to kill him. He checked under the benches, around the shelter, even kicked over the trash can. No rope. The whole time, the hanging ghost was pressed against the bus window like a kid watching his favorite show, tongue out, practically drooling. That thing was waiting for Li Xiaoyu to run out of time. Turns out there was a hidden countdown. Stay off the bus too long, and you become ghost property. Li Xiaoyu had no idea about any of this. He just had this beautifully simple thought of, the driver probably won't wait forever, and sprinted back to the bus with maybe seconds to spare. The ghost's smile froze on its face like someone had paused a video at the worst possible frame. You could practically hear its internal screaming. It mumbled something about Li Xiaoyu being lucky, then went quiet. But I caught the way its mouth curled back up after a few seconds, slow and deliberate, like it already knew something Li Xiaoyu didn't. That rope was hidden somewhere nasty. Somewhere even the ghost didn't want to go. This task was rigged from the start, and Li Xiaoyu had just barely survived round one of a game he couldn't win. I peeled off another seat cover. Zip, fold, stuff into backpack. Beautiful. Now here's where things got really entertaining. Another player, some office worker type named Lin Yi, had been sitting perfectly still this entire time, doing the classic, if I don't move, nothing can see me, survival strategy. Smart man. When the two suited ghosts boarded earlier, he didn't even blink. He knew overworked salary men carry the most resentment, alive or dead, so he kept his eyes glued to the floor like his life depended on it. Because it literally did. But watching Li Xiaoyu come back alive flipped a switch in his brain. He started doing math. Basic mission gives 10 points. 10 points buys garbage. No upgrades means death in future dungeons. Extra missions are risky, but necessary. His inner accountant was running a full cost-benefit analysis while sitting on a haunted bus. I respected the hustle even if the timing was questionable. Lin Yi scanned his options. The hanging ghost? Absolutely not. That thing was nightmare fuel. But way in the back, there was a student ghost. Quiet kid with a backpack and a book. Just sitting there reading like this was a normal Tuesday commute. Lin Yi's logic was simple. Student equals easy task equals safe points. Not a bad theory. Terrible execution though, because he walked right up, sat down next to a ghost, and opened with the most generic line possible. Hey little buddy, need any help? The student looked up. Their eyes met. Task accepted. The kid rummaged through his backpack and pulled out a piece of paper. I was expecting some creepy treasure map or a blood-written letter. Nope. It was a test. A high school exam paper. The ghost student's unfinished homework. The extra mission was literally, do this ghost's math test for him. Lin Yi's face went through about 15 emotions in 2 seconds. Confusion, then relief, then a flicker of, wait, is this actually hard? The mission reward popped up, 50 points. 5 times the basic reward. Lin Yi was thrilled for about 3 seconds until he noticed something missing. There was no listed punishment for failure. In horror games, No listed punishment usually means the punishment is death. Right on cue. The student's eyes turned into bottomless black holes. Blood started leaking down his face like someone turned on a faucet behind his eyeballs, and he asked in the creepiest voice imaginable, "Are you backing out?" Lin Yi said no so fast he almost bit his own tongue. The ghost kid snapped back to normal like nothing happened and casually dropped the real kicker. "Finish before the last stop, or I eat you." So Lin Yi looked at the test paper, and his face just collapsed. It was a senior year exam. The man had been out of school for years. All that knowledge had evacuated his brain long ago, taking his hairline with it as a souvenir. He tried to find a loophole. The task said, complete the test, not pass it. Maybe he could just scribble random answers? The ghost shut that down immediately, almost bored about it. You need at least a passing grade. Don't try anything clever. I watched this entire disaster unfold while casually unzipping my 8th seat cover. Zip. Fold. Stuff. Another 15 points for the collection. My backpack was getting satisfyingly heavy. Everyone else on this bus was fighting for their lives, making deals with demons, doing ghost homework under threat of being devoured, and I was just here, crouched behind 2 skeletons, peacefully dismantling public transportation furniture like the world's most productive vandal. Honestly, best horror game experience ever. 10 out of 10. Would strip bus upholstery again. Last seat cover. Done. 5 covers total, 75 points of energy stuffed into my backpack like the world's most cursed laundry bag. I stretched my neck, cracked my knuckles, and took a victory lap with my eyes around the bus interior. Li Xiaoyu was staring out the window planning his next rope hunt. That Zhao Yixiao kid was still peeking at my skeletons every 3 seconds like they were going to leap over the seats and eat him. And Lin Yi, this grown man, was hunched over a high school test paper in the back row, forehead veins popping, looking like he was solving the meaning of life instead of quadratic equations. A ghost student sat next to him radiating, finish or die, energy. Beautiful chaos all around. None of my business, though. I was done. Mission accomplished. Seat cover empire secured. Time to sit back, relax, and ride this creepy bus to the finish line without any more. Then I saw it. Hanging on the wall right behind the driver's seat, there was a dusty old blanket. My eyes locked onto it, and the tooltip popped up instantly. Fox fur blanket. 100 energy points. 100. That single blanket was worth more than every seat cover I'd spent the last hour carefully unzipping combined. My brain short-circuited and immediately started doing math at a speed I hadn't achieved since my college entrance exams. 75 from covers, 100 from the blanket, plus whatever Xiao Zhang and Xiao Wang were passively inhaling. 1 dungeon run, and I could wipe out nearly a third of my entire debt. Pay off the debt, develop the territory, wake up more skeletons, build an army, conquer everything. I was already picturing myself sitting on that stone throne with 100 skeleton soldiers kneeling before me, a couple of the smarter ones draping a golden robe over my shoulders. Emperor of the Dead, Lord of Bones. The horror game wouldn't know what hit it. I stood up so fast I nearly headbutt the ceiling. Marched straight to the front of the bus like a man on a mission. The hanging ghost glanced at me as I passed, but looked away immediately. Still zero interest. My passive skill was doing the Lord's work. I sat down in the seat right behind the driver and started yanking the blanket. It didn't budge. I pulled harder. Nothing. Grabbed it with both hands and braced my feet against the floor, ready to go full tug-of-war champion. That's enough. I froze mid-pull. The driver was watching me through the rearview mirror. Bald head, dark sunglasses reflecting the dim bus lights, expression somewhere between annoyed and exhausted. The seat covers belong to the company, so whatever, I don't care, he said. But that blanket is mine. Our eyes met in the mirror. I felt a jolt. Eye contact with a dungeon entity usually meant trouble. But then again, my skill had been handling that all day. Still, getting caught red-handed trying to steal a ghost bus driver's personal blanket was not exactly how I pictured this moment going. Ha ha ha, sorry about that. I let go and laughed like an idiot. Full awkward mode activated. The driver sighed the heaviest sigh I'd heard since that well back at my territory. Kid, this city isn't that bad. You're young and healthy. Surely you can find a job somewhere. You don't need to be ripping apart buses for a living. I could even ask around the company, get you something. He thought I was a petty thief. A broke, Desperate young man stealing bus upholstery because he couldn't find employment. My dignity took a direct hit. I waved my hands frantically. No, 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 you've got it all wrong. I'm not unemployed. I just really like collecting things. He stared at me for 2 painful seconds through the mirror, then sighed again. Look, if you really want the blanket, it's not impossible. My ears perked up like a dog hearing a treat bag. I'm listening. Just help me with a small favor, and the blanket is yours. Of course, you can also refuse. I refuse. The word left my mouth before he even finished his sentence. I knew exactly where this was going. Help me with a favor. On a haunted bus is just code for, please accept this terrifying extra mission that might kill you. I'd watched everyone else on this bus get suckered into tasks through eye contact and conversation, and I wasn't about to join the club. 100 points wasn't worth my life. I had a perfectly good strategy of being boring and invisible, and I intended to keep it that way. The driver's jaw actually dropped. In the rearview mirror, I could see his sunglasses slide down his nose half an inch from pure shock. He sat there processing for a solid 3 seconds. You're not even going to ask what the favor is. I was already turning around to walk back to my seat. Don't care. Whatever it is, the answer is no. See you at the last stop. Get back here. His voice boomed through the entire bus like thunder. Everyone froze. Lin Ye's pen stopped mid-equation. Li Xiaoyu flinched so hard, he almost fell off his seat. Even the hanging ghost straightened up and looked away like a kid caught misbehaving. The driver scanned the bus through the mirror. Mind your business. All of you. Every single entity on that bus instantly pretended to be very interested in something else. Even the ghosts were scared of this guy. I stood in the middle of the aisle, weighing my options. On one hand, I had every right to refuse and walk away. On the other hand, this man was driving the bus I needed to survive on until the last stop, and making the driver my enemy seemed like the fastest possible route to a game over screen. I could picture the death notification now. Player Su Yuanxiu, cause of death. Road rage. I walked back, leaned against the railing next to the driver's seat. Crossed my arms. You literally said I could refuse. I said you could refuse, but at least let me finish talking first. He was genuinely upset now. You cut me off before I even said what I needed. Do I not deserve basic respect? I looked at this bald, sunglasses-wearing, ghost bus driver who was throwing a tantrum because I hurt his feelings, and something in my brain just relaxed. This dude wasn't scary. He was just a guy who wanted to be heard. Fine, 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 I said, waving my hand like I was calming down a toddler. Go ahead. I'm all ears. He opened his mouth, paused, and decided not to address the patronizing tone. Smart man. He gazed dramatically through the windshield into the endless darkness ahead and said in a deep, wistful voice, it was roughly 80 years ago. Skip to the point, please. His entire dramatic build-up shattered like glass. He turned to look at me with murder in his eyes. Opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. Closed it. The internal battle between, I need this guy's help, and I want to throw this guy off my bus, was playing out across his face in real time. Finally, he swallowed his rage and turned back to the road. I almost felt bad. Almost. But I had a debt to pay and a territory to rebuild, and I did not have time for an 80-year ghost backstory. The bald driver looked like he was about to crack his own teeth from grinding them so hard. Fine. I'll skip to the point. He took a deep breath that seemed to come from the bottom of his ghostly soul. I used to be a delivery guy. Okay, that I did not expect. Ghost bus driver origin story, food delivery man. Not exactly the dramatic backstory I was bracing for. One day, I went to deliver an order. The security guard at the apartment complex gate stopped me. Wouldn't let me in. That part, whatever, I could handle. But then he started cursing me out. I talked back a little, and he beat me up. His voice was calm, almost too calm, like he'd rehearsed this speech in his head every single day for decades. But his knuckles on the steering wheel were white as my skeleton soldier's ribcages. I wasn't strong enough back then. Couldn't fight back. He paused. That was 80 years ago. 80 years. This man had been nursing a grudge against a security guard for nearly a century. I've heard of people holding on to resentment, but this was Olympic-level grudge holding. Gold medal, world record, Hall of Fame. The hanging ghost sitting a few rows back had nothing on this level of pure, concentrated spite. Now I'm stronger, he said. Then he looked at me. Actually turned his whole head away from the road for the first time, which was terrifying for entirely non-supernatural reasons. and hit me with the punchline. My next shift change isn't for another 50 years. I can't wait that long. He reached down beside his seat and pulled something out. I looked down. It was a wrench. But calling it a wrench felt like calling a tsunami, some water. This thing was massive. Covered in grease stains. Easily 10 pounds of solid metal fury. It looked like it could knock out a rhino, let alone a security guard. He held it out to me. We're going to pass by that apartment complex soon. I'll stop for 10 minutes. You take this, walk over to the guard booth, and smack him on the head with it. One good hit. I took the wrench with both hands, and it immediately dragged my arms to the floor like an anchor. As I struggled to hold it up, the tooltip appeared. Wrench of Resentment. 150 energy points. Medium attack power. Special effect. Bonus damage against anyone named Wang Guiqing. Guaranteed knockout on first hit. This lunatic had custom-crafted a weapon with a name-specific special effect. He'd been carrying this thing around for years, fine-tuning his revenge plan, just waiting for someone dumb enough to do the hitting for him. And that someone was apparently me. You want me to use this to hit a security guard? He nodded. A security guard you lost to 80 years ago? He nodded again. What's his power level now? After 80 years? The driver went quiet for a second too long. 80 years have passed, so he's probably gotten stronger too. You don't even know, and you're sending me in? I've been stuck on this bus for 60 years. How would I know what he's been up to? We were both yelling now. Two guys screaming at each other on a haunted bus at God knows what hour, arguing about whether or not a security guard ghost had been hitting the gym for the past 8 decades. Peak horror game experience. He calmed down first, probably because he needed me more than I needed him. His voice got softer. Look, he's probably still weak. If he'd actually made something of himself, he wouldn't still be working as a security guard, right? I stared at him. He's about 400 pounds. Hard to miss, he added helpfully. And if you get there and he's not around, just come back. No harm done. The mission prompt appeared. Help the driver complete his revenge. Reward. The fox fur blanket plus 200 points. Accept or decline. Unlike every other player on this bus, I actually had a choice. That beautiful little accept or decline option sat there glowing, courtesy of my passive skill. I could walk away clean. 0 risk. But I ran the numbers. The blanket alone was 100 points. The wrench was 150. The mission reward was 200 points, 20 times the basic survival mission. And if things went sideways, I could just fail the mission and bail. No listed punishment. No, I'll eat you if you don't finish. Claws like poor Lin Ye's homework assignment from hell. I accepted. The driver's face split into the biggest grin I'd seen on any ghost all day. I knew I picked the right guy. He reached under his seat again and pulled out a dusty old water bottle with no label. Here, have some water, brother. I almost said no thanks, but then the tooltip popped up. Energy container, capacity 350 points. This wasn't water. This was a portable energy tank. I snatched it out of his hand so fast he probably thought I was dehydrated. No way was I drinking whatever liquid ghosts kept in unlabeled bottles. But as a container? Absolute treasure. Sit behind me, the driver said warmly. I'll watch your back. Nobody on this bus will bother you while you're under my protection. Just like that, I went from bus vandal to VIP passenger. I had a ghost bodyguard driving the vehicle, 2 skeleton bodyguards in the seats ahead, an anti-security guard superweapon on the floor, and a backpack full of stolen seat covers. For a moment, I considered trying to pocket the wrench after the mission, 115 points just sitting there, but the thing was clearly custom-made with decades of resentment baked in. No way the driver wouldn't notice it missing. I leaned back in my seat and closed my eyes. Between the system crash, the territory debt, the seat cover harvesting, and the driver negotiations, I was exhausted. The driver would wake me when we arrived. After all, he'd been waiting 80 years for this moment. He wasn't about to let me sleep through it. Across the aisle, I could vaguely hear Li Xiaoyu hyperventilating with jealousy. Apparently, he'd been watching my whole conversation with the driver, watch me argue, refuse, get yelled at, and somehow walk away with free weapons, free containers, and VIP protection. Meanwhile, he was out here risking his life searching for ghost rope at creepy bus stops. I almost felt bad for the guy. Almost. I woke up with my neck bent at an angle that would make a chiropractor weep. Sleeping on a haunted bus, 0 stars, would not recommend. I knocked on the driver's partition and asked where we were, which was a completely useless question because I don't know any of the street names in Ghost City. My brain was still buffering. I corrected myself and asked the real question, how far to the security guard's compound? The bald driver got so excited he nearly swerved off the road. 2 more stops. Get ready. He started giving me tactical advice, waving one hand around while steering with the other, miming bashing someone's skull in. His master plan was breathtakingly simple. Run in, smash, run out. Real military genius, this guy. I looked down at the 10-pound wrench on the floor and did some basic physics in my head. I can barely lift this thing with 2 hands. The target is a 400-pound monster. Even if he's short, 400 pounds means he's built like a refrigerator lying on its side. The drivers, just bonk him and sprint. Strategy had a fatal flaw, which was that it was a terrible strategy. Then I remembered I had employees. Xiao Zhang and Xiao Wang had been sitting there the whole ride, doing absolutely nothing productive except terrorizing that poor Zhao Yixiao kid. Apparently, my 2 skeleton soldiers had discovered a new hobby. Every time Zhao Yixiao peeked back at them, they'd snap their heads toward him in perfect unison. He'd flinch and turn away. 10 seconds later, he'd peek again. They'd stare again. This had been going on for hours. The 2 most bored skeletons in existence had invented the ghost version of peekaboo, and their only test subject was on the verge of a complete psychological breakdown. Meanwhile, 3 new ghost passengers had boarded during my nap. One old lady ghost tried to sit in the empty seat next to me, and the driver screamed at her until she shuffled away. She didn't argue. She knew the driver would literally eat her if she pushed it. My VIP protection was working flawlessly. Back to the plan. If I sent Xiao Zhang and Xiao Wang in first as a distraction, the security guard pigman would focus on them. Then I could sneak around behind and deliver one beautiful, wrench-powered knockout blow. It wasn't elegant, but it was better than the driver's suggestion of, just wing it, bro. I asked the driver for more intel on the target. He told me 2 useful things and 1 terrifying thing. Useful thing 1. Wang Guoqing hates delivery workers and office workers. If he sees either type, he goes aggressive. Useful thing 2. He's still a security guard after 80 years, so he probably hasn't leveled up much. Terrifying thing. He has an electric baton, and it's powerful. Great. My enemy had a weapon too. This was rapidly becoming less of a stealth mission and more of a boss fight. But wait, hates office workers? That gave me an idea. If I could dress up like a white-collar worker, Wang Guoqing would charge straight at me on sight. I could use myself as bait, lead him into position, and have my skeletons flank him while I go for the wrench shot. I just needed one thing, a business suit. My eyes drifted across the bus and landed on the hanging ghost, sitting right there in his wrinkled office clothes. A perfectly good suit, currently being worn by a dead man who wasn't using it for anything except looking sad and scaring players. I got up and sat down right next to him. Li Xiaoyu, sitting 1 row ahead, leaned backward so hard trying to eavesdrop that he nearly tipped his seat over. The hanging ghost didn't look up. He knew I was there. You can't exactly sneak up on a supernatural entity, but he was giving me the silent treatment. I cleared my throat and went for it. Hey brother, can I ask a favor? Mind lending me your suit for a bit? The temperature around me dropped about 15 degrees. The ghost raised his head slowly. His face had gone from resting dead to actively murderous in under a second. Do you want to die? His voice came out like ice cracking. I threw my hands up. Whoa, 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 just borrowing. I'll give it right back. I promise. That was apparently the wrong thing to say because his tongue, that horrible, blackened, half-meter-long tongue, shot out of his mouth directly at my face. The smell hit me before the tongue did. Rotting meat mixed with something I never want to identify. I threw myself backward so hard I nearly fell into the aisle. I'll grant your death wish, he gurgled through a mouthful of extended tongue, lunging toward me. This was it. I'd survived the entire bus ride without a single scratch, dodged every ghost encounter through pure passive skill energy, maintained perfect neutrality with every supernatural entity on board, and I was about to die because I asked to borrow someone's jacket. What a way to go. Player Suyu Shio, cause of death, fashion request. But then my guardian angel, my bald, sunglasses-wearing, grudge-holding guardian angel, intervened. Lend it to him. The driver roared from behind the wheel. What happened next was so fast I almost missed it. The hanging straps above the seats, those plastic loops you hold on to when standing, suddenly came alive. They whipped through the air like snakes, wrapped around the ghost's outstretched tongue, and yanked him straight up off his seat. The hanging ghost was now hanging from the bus, tongue first, dangling from the ceiling like a grotesque Christmas ornament. The driver controlled the entire bus. Every strap, every rail, every bolt. This was his territory, and he'd just used it to clothesline a ghost by its own tongue because I needed to borrow a suit jacket. I stood there, heart pounding, tongue smell still burning my nostrils, watching a ghost dangle from the ceiling by his own grotesque body part. Somewhere in the back, Lin Yu was still doing math homework. Zhao Yixiao was probably crying. Li Xiaoyu had given up trying to understand anything happening on this bus. And somewhere 3 stops ahead, in a security booth, a 400-pound pig-headed guard was watching TV and laughing, completely unaware that a bald ghost driver had spent 80 years planning his downfall, and that the instrument of his revenge was a 20-year-old guy from another world who couldn't even dress himself without starting an interdimensional incident. The driver didn't waste a single second. Those ceiling straps whipped the hanging ghost's suit jacket right off his body like an aggressive dry cleaner. The ghost was left dangling in the air, half naked, looking absolutely devastated. The driver even had the nerve to turn around and ask me, "You want the pants too?" No. No. The jacket is fine. Please stop. I was shaking my head so fast I almost gave myself whiplash. The hanging ghost looked like he was about to burst into tears. If we took his pants too, I was genuinely concerned we'd witness the world's first ghost mental breakdown on public transit. The driver floated the suit jacket over to me through the ceiling straps, then pointed at the hanging ghost with the energy of a mob boss. "This guy works for me now. Don't try anything funny, or next time it won't just be a jacket coming off." The ghost curled up in his seat like a kicked puppy and didn't make another sound. I felt a tiny bit guilty. I patted him on the shoulder and said, "Hey man, I'll return it when I'm done. I promise." That was the wrong move. The ghost started sobbing, full-on crying. My one act of kindness had completely shattered whatever pride he had left. Getting stripped by force was one thing, but having the guy who caused it come back to comfort you? That was the final humiliation. Between hiccups, he was probably swearing to never ride a bus again for the rest of his afterlife. Li Xiaoyu, on the other hand, was having the time of his life watching his tormentor get publicly humiliated. The ghost who'd been terrorizing him all ride was now a whimpering mess. Sweet karma. But I also caught him staring at me with this look, half admiration, half jealousy, like a kid watching another kid get all the good Halloween candy. His ghost boss threatened to kill him every 5 minutes. My ghost boss was giving me weapons and stripping other ghosts for me. Life really isn't fair, even in death games. I handed the suit jacket to one of my skeleton soldiers. "Here, put this on." I honestly couldn't tell Xiao Zhang from Xiao Wang. They were identical bone piles, so I just picked the closer one and called him Xiao Zhang. Maybe it was Xiao Wang. Didn't matter. He grabbed the jacket and started wrestling his arm bones into the sleeves like a toddler trying to dress himself. Bones clattered. Joints popped. It took him a solid minute, but he got it on. The jacket stretched tight across his ribcage, buttons refusing to close over his chest plate, the whole thing hanging open like a skeleton runway model who didn't care about fashion rules. But from a distance, with the collar popped and the sleeves mostly in place, he actually looked like a very thin, very dead office worker. Good enough. The entire bus had gone completely silent watching this happen. Every single player had the same realization hit them at the exact same moment. Those 2 skeletons weren't random monsters. They were MY skeletons, following MY orders. I was the guy who'd been casually commanding undead soldiers this whole time, while everyone else cowered in fear. Poor Zhao Yixiao took it the hardest. This kid had spent the entire ride terrified of Xiao Zhang and Xiao Wang. Every time he peeked back at them, they'd snap their heads toward him in unison. He thought they were hunting him. He thought they were choosing their moment to attack. Turns out they were just bored and playing a game. They'd been doing the skeleton equivalent of making faces at a baby. Stare when he looks, wait when he doesn't, repeat forever. The 2 most understimulated employees in the history of undead labor had invented their own entertainment, and Zhao Yixiao was the toy. Now that the truth was out, Zhao Yixiao stood up in a burst of righteous anger, then immediately sat back down, because he remembered that 5 minutes ago, the driver had strung up a ghost and forcibly undressed it on my behalf. starting a confrontation with someone who had two skeleton bodyguards and the bus driver as backup seemed like a fast track to joining the hanging ghost support group. He buried his face in his knees and silently seethed. Honestly, I hadn't even noticed the guy existed until that moment. He'd been scared of me this entire time, and I never once looked in his direction. Somehow that made it worse for him. Lin Ye's pen had frozen mid-equation. He stared at the skeleton buttoning a suit jacket and seemed to have a small existential crisis before slowly returning to his test paper. Ghost homework waits for no revelation. I briefed my troops. Xiao Zhang in the suit would walk toward the security booth first, looking as office workerish as a skeleton possibly could. The driver told me Wang Guoqing had a special hatred for white-collar types, so a suited-up figure approaching his booth should trigger an aggressive response. While Pigface focused on the skeleton decoy, I'd circle around behind with the wrench and deliver one legendary bonk to the back of his skull. Xiao Wang would be backup in case things went sideways. Simple plan. Possibly stupid plan, but the best plan available to a guy with two skeletons and a grudge wrench. The driver coughed from behind his partition. 5 minutes out. Get ready. He was more nervous than I was. This was 80 years of fury about to either pay off or fall apart. I confirmed the most important detail, 10 minutes. That's how long he could park the bus. Not 1 second more. If I wasn't back by then, the bus leaves and I'm stranded in Ghost City forever. Apparently, illegal parking in the spirit world has consequences even worse than fines. The bus slowed. Through the grimy window, a residential compound appeared. The gate had a small guard booth with a dim yellow light glowing inside. I could see a massive silhouette sitting in there. The driver pulled over early, not even at the proper stop, because he wanted front row seats to watch his nemesis get wrecked. 80 years of planning, and he was vibrating with anticipation behind that steering wheel. He pointed at the booth with one shaking finger. Go. I'll be watching. I picked up the wrench. My arm sagged under the weight. Xiao Zhang stood beside me in his stolen suit jacket, jaw clacking softly. Xiao Wang cracked his neck bones, ready for action. 3 of us against one 400-pound pig monster with an electric baton and 80 years of security guard experience. What could possibly go wrong? The bus doors hissed open and I stepped out into the Ghost City night, with my 2 skeleton soldiers flanking me like the world's worst security detail. Li Xiaoyu hopped off behind me, which surprised me a little. I'd honestly forgotten he existed. But the guy had his own mission, searching every stop for that stupid hanging rope, so fair enough. For about 5 glorious seconds, Li Xiaoyu looked relieved to have company. Then he realized I was heading straight for the apartment complex while he needed the bus stop, and his face crumbled like a cookie in a washing machine. The one time he had backup, and we were going in opposite directions. But things got way worse for him way faster. Because the driver had parked early, Li Xiaoyu walked right into the new passengers waiting to board. 2 figures stepped out of the shadows. One had a wolf's head. The other had a hyena's head. They were literally the Chinese idiom, wolves and hyenas conspiring together, brought to life as actual bus passengers, and their eyes were glowing green and locked directly onto the only living human standing at the stop, Li Xiaoyu. His legs started cramping from pure terror. I would have felt bad, but I had my own problems. What happened next, though, I only heard about afterward, and honestly, it was the plot twist of the century. The hanging ghost saved him. Yeah, that hanging ghost. The one I'd borrowed the suit jacket from. The one who'd been crying 5 minutes ago. He slammed his fists against the bus window, ripped it open, shoved half his body outside, and unleashed the most spectacular string of profanity I have ever heard in any language, living or dead. Every curse word that has ever existed, plus several that I'm pretty sure he invented on the spot, came pouring out of his mouth like a fire hose of pure verbal violence aimed directly at the wolf and hyena. Those 2 forgot about Li Xiaoyu instantly and stormed onto the bus looking absolutely furious. Then the ghost screamed at Li Xiaoyu to stop being useless and follow me instead of searching the bus stop. Turns out the hanging rope had been in the security guard's booth this whole time. The ghost had known all along, but originally wanted Li Xiaoyu to fail so he'd be trapped on the bus forever. But now that the driver's mission and his own mission pointed to the same location, he'd changed his strategy. If Li Xiaoyu could grab the rope while I dealt with the guard, everybody wins. Well, everybody except the guard. From inside the bus, I heard muffled thumping and screaming. The wolf and hyena were apparently teaching the ghost a lesson for his creative vocabulary. I chose not to think about it. I reached the apartment complex gate and crouched behind a wall to scope out the target. One peek through the guard booth window, and my entire plan fell apart in my brain. Wang Guiqing was a mountain. Not just fat. I'd been told 400 pounds, but impossibly tall with it. Sitting in his chair, his back looked like a boulder wearing a uniform. He was laughing at something on an old TV and shoveling food into his face. And even seated, he looked bigger than me standing on my tiptoes with the wrench held over my head. I did some quick mental geometry. If this thing stood up, his head would be somewhere around the ceiling. My wrench, at maximum arm extension, would reach approximately his lower back. I might as well be trying to bonk a giraffe. The whole plan was built around sneaking up behind him and cracking him on the skull. But I physically could not reach his skull. Xiao Zhang in his borrowed suit could draw the guard's attention forward, sure, but even with a clear shot from behind, I'd need a stepladder, a trampoline, or possibly a small aircraft to get enough height for a proper headshot. I was still running calculations in my head. Could I do a running jump? Maybe vault off something? When Li Xiaoyu caught up to me, panting, he spotted the hanging rope dangling from the ceiling of the guard booth immediately. He also spotted the Titan sitting beneath it and went visibly pale. "What are you doing here?" I whispered. He pointed at the rope. Made sense. We needed the same thing. The guard unconscious and out of the way. Natural alliance. "Got any ideas for getting past that guy?" he asked. I showed him the wrench. "I need to hit him on the head. But I can only reach his head if he's sitting down and facing away from me. Or if I'm about 3 feet taller." Li Xiaoyu stared at the wrench, stared at the guard, stared at me, and then said the most obvious thing in the world that I had somehow completely overlooked. "Why don't I just carry you on my shoulders?" I slapped my own forehead so hard my palm stung. Of course, I'd been so locked into the original plan, skeleton decoy, sneak attack, solo mission, that I never considered the simplest possible solution. My entire strategy had been built around working alone because my only allies were 2 skeletons who might collapse under my weight. But standing right next to me was an actual human being with actual muscles who could just hoist me up like a kid at a concert trying to see the stage. "You can handle my weight?" I asked. He looked almost offended. "I work out." We did a quick test run right there behind the wall. He squatted. I climbed on his shoulders. He stood up, solid as a rock. From up there, I could absolutely reach even a giant pig monster's skull with a 10-pound wrench of pure concentrated 80-year-old resentment. The special effect guaranteed a knockout on first hit against anyone named Wang Guiqing. One swing was all I needed. "Here's the plan," I whispered from atop his shoulders before climbing back down. Xiao Zhang walks into the compound wearing the suit. The guard hates office workers, so he'll charge forward. While he's focused on the skeleton, you carry me in from behind. I swing. He drops. You run inside, grab the rope, and we both sprint back to the bus before the 10 minutes are up. Li Xiaoyu nodded without hesitation. For a guy who'd been shaking like a leaf all night, he'd found his courage remarkably fast when there was a concrete plan and a concrete reward waiting at the end. Funny how that works. I turned to Xiao Zhang, standing there in his ill-fitting stolen suit jacket, jaw hanging slightly open, ghost flames flickering in his eye sockets like a pair of cheap birthday candles. My elite corporate infiltration unit. My skeleton in business casual. "Walk in there," I told him. "Make sure the guard faces you, away from the back entrance. And try to look office-wide." He clacked his jaw twice. I chose to interpret that as confident agreement. Xiao Zhang marched toward the apartment gate like a skeleton on a job interview, swinging his bony arms with way too much confidence for someone who didn't have muscles. I stationed Xiao Wang nearby as backup, my emergency reserve unit, also known as the other pile of bones I can't tell apart from the first one. The plan kicked off beautifully. Xiao Zhang grabbed the iron gate and started rattling it like he was trying to break into a nightclub after closing time. Inside the guard booth, the TV light flickered across what I now realized was not just a fat man, but an actual pig-headed monster. Wang Guiqing heard the rattling, looked up, and absolutely lost it. He spotted a skeleton in a business suit shaking his gate, and the combination of undead creature plus office worker clothing triggered every rage button in his enormous body simultaneously. He launched out of that booth like a 400-pound cannonball with tusks. When I finally got a clear look at him standing upright, My brain needed a moment. 2 meters tall. 400 pounds. A head the size of two of mine stacked together. Bristly hair, standing straight up like steel needles. This wasn't a security guard. This was a final boss someone had accidentally placed at the tutorial level. Suddenly, the 10-pound wrench made perfect sense. Anything lighter would have bounced off this creature like a ping-pong ball off a brick wall. Li Xiaoyu squatted down. I climbed onto his shoulders, and we began our tactical approach. Two humans in a trenchcoat formation, creeping toward a pig monster's exposed back, while carrying a weapon forged from 8 decades of concentrated spite. Covert operations at their absolute finest. Wang Guoqing had grabbed Xiao Zhang by the spine neck and lifted him clean off the ground. My skeleton was dangling there, limbs still flailing, jaw still clacking, absolutely committed to the distraction role, even while being physically removed from the Earth's surface. The pig monster was talking about how skeletons were rare around here, and he didn't want to risk angering whatever army might come looking for this one. Smart, actually. Wrong, but smart. My army consisted of one more skeleton and a military strategist who was probably back at the territory writing diary entries about my likelihood of survival. Then Wang Guoqing turned around and spotted us. 2 guys, stacked vertically, one holding a massive wrench overhead like a cartoon character about to bonk someone. We'd been sneaking up behind a giant pig man in the most ridiculous attack formation ever conceived, and we got caught red-handed because I wanted to aim properly instead of just swinging. Ha. Awkward, was all I managed to say. Li Xiaoyu, from below my legs, hissed up at me. I told you to just swing. But no. You wanted to line it up perfectly. Wang Guoqing raised one meaty finger at us, mouth opening to say something threatening. And that was his mistake. That half-second of pointing and dramatic pause gave me exactly the opening I needed. Take this. I swung the wrench with everything I had. It connected dead center on his forehead, and the moment metal touched Pig's skull, something insane happened. A massive eruption of black energy exploded out of the wrench like it had been holding its breath for 80 years. Which, technically, it had. Every ounce of the bald driver's resentment, every sleepless night replaying that humiliation, every fantasy of revenge, it all detonated on impact. The wrench basically swung itself downward, dragging me with it, slamming into Wang Guoqing's head with supernatural force. I heard bone crack. His eyes bulged out of their sockets. And this 400-pound, 2-meter-tall pig monster dropped to his knees with a thunderous crash that I swear shook the ground beneath Li Xiaoyu's feet. The mighty security guard, terror of delivery workers everywhere, was kneeling before a guy riding another guy's shoulders. Poetic justice had never looked so stupid. Back on the bus, though I didn't know this at the time, the bald driver watched through his window and screamed, yes, so loud that every passenger on board broke into cold sweats. Apparently resolving his 80-year grudge literally made him more powerful. His spiritual shackles broke and a wave of energy swept through the bus, pressing down on every ghost and player inside. Good for him. Therapy through violence really does work sometimes. I slapped Li Xiaoyu's head. Put me down. Go get the rope. He snapped out of his shock, crouched, dumped me off his shoulders, and sprinted toward the guard booth. I kept my distance from the kneeling pig man and scanned the ground. His electric baton had fallen beside him. 15 energy points, medium attack power, chance to paralyze on hit. I snatched it and shoved it in my pocket faster than I've ever pocketed anything in my life. Then greed kicked in. If the baton had energy, surely the guard booth was full of haunted objects worth collecting. I rushed inside to find almost nothing. A couple of tiny trinkets on the desk, with barely any energy. Massive disappointment. I'd been imagining a treasure cave and got a clearance bin at a ghost yard sale. Li Xiaoyu had already grabbed the hanging rope, though the way he grabbed, it was concerning. The thing had apparently looped itself around his neck like it was trying to fulfill its life purpose. He stood there with a noose around his throat and a look on his face that said, I have questions, but no time to ask them. Let's go, he urged. Time's almost up. I pocketed the desk trinkets. Waste not, want not, and turned toward the door. A shadow filled the doorframe. Wang Guoqing stood there, gripping the door frame with both hands, black blood pouring down his face from the crack in his skull. His eyes were glowing red. He was very much not unconscious anymore. Leaving, he snarled, blocking our only exit. Where do you think you're going? The wrench's guaranteed knockout apparently had an expiration date. and we'd just hit it. 400 pounds of furious pig monster stood between us and the bus. Our 10-minute timer was running out, and the only weapon I had left was an electric baton I hadn't even figured out how to turn on yet. The pig woke up. That was the entire problem in one sentence. 1 second I was checking his guard booth for loot like a budget treasure hunter. The next second 400 pounds of bleeding, furious pork was filling the doorway and asking where I thought I was going. His skull was cracked open and leaking black blood everywhere, and he looked angrier than before I'd hit him. The 80-year revenge wrench, the weapon specifically designed to destroy this exact creature, had given us maybe 5 seconds of knockout time. 5. The bald driver had miscalculated so badly that if this were a math test, Linya's ghost student would have eaten him twice. I didn't think. I didn't strategize. I jumped onto the desk, ripped open the window, and launched myself through it like I was auditioning for an action movie where the hero has zero dignity. Parkour powered by pure survival instinct. I yelled at Li Xiaoyu to follow me, and the poor guy snapped out of his trance just in time to dive through the window behind me. Wang Guoqing tried to grab us, but missed. He had to double back through the door because, unlike me, he could not fit through a window. Small victories. Unfortunately, this bought us approximately 2 seconds of lead time because that pig monster could run. 400 pounds, 2 meters tall, and he moved like someone half his size. His footsteps behind us sounded like a giant was playing drums on the pavement, each boom getting louder, getting closer. I looked over my shoulder and instantly regretted it. That massive pig face was gaining on us, blood streaming from his forehead, tusks bared, eyes burning red. The bald driver had assured me this guy probably hadn't improved in 80 years because, if he'd made something of himself, he wouldn't still be a security guard. Wrong. He was still a security guard because he liked beating people up at the gate, not because he lacked the power to do anything else. The wrench that should have put old Wang Guoqing in a coma for weeks barely gave the current version a headache. Li Xiaoyu was falling behind. He'd been carrying me on his shoulders for the sneak attack, and his legs were running on fumes. I could hear his breathing getting ragged, his footsteps getting slower. The thumping behind us was getting dangerously close to his back. Then something amazing happened. The hanging rope around his neck came alive and basically turned into a sled dog leash. It yanked him forward so hard his feet barely touched the ground. The rope wanted to escape Wang Guoqing just as badly as we did, maybe more. It had been stuck in that guard booth under the pigman's control, and this was its one shot at freedom. Li Xiaoyu went from about to collapse to being dragged at full speed by a possessed noose in half a second. He actually shot past me, eyes wide, feet windmilling, neck rope pulling him like a kite in a hurricane. We had maybe 200 meters to the bus. I could see it sitting there, lights on, engine running. 200 meters between me and survival. My legs were screaming. My lungs were on fire. The 10-pound wrench in my hand felt like it weighed 100. Then I remembered Xiao Wang. My backup. My emergency reserve. The skeleton I'd left hiding in the shadows specifically for a moment exactly like this one. Xiao Wang. Stop him. Xiao Wang stepped out from behind the wall. He took one look at the charging mountain of pork bearing down on us and made the smartest tactical decision any skeleton has ever made in the history of undead warfare. He did not try to fight. He did not try to block. He dove under Wang Guoqing's feet like a living, well, unliving, banana peel. The pigman never saw it coming. His foot landed on something hard and bony. His second foot caught on another bone, and 400 pounds of furious security guard went airborne in the most spectacular wipeout I have ever witnessed. He toppled backward like a demolished building, hit the ground so hard the earth shook beneath my feet, and lay there spread-eagled on the pavement in a cloud of dust and rage. I turned around and saw Xiao Wang, or what was left of him. He'd been completely shattered by the impact, scattered across the ground in a mess of disconnected bones. One detached hand was still raised, waving at me weakly. Go, boss. Keep running. Then I saw Xiao Zhang's leg poking out from underneath Wang Guoqing's massive body. He'd been clinging to the pig's back the whole chase and was now pancaked beneath him, crushed flat. My feet stopped moving. These two idiots. These clumsy, speechless, gabba-gabba, bone piles that I'd met only hours ago. They couldn't talk. They could barely follow instructions. Their biggest achievement before today was playing peekaboo with a scared teenager on a bus, and they'd just thrown themselves apart. literally disassembled themselves, so I could make it to safety. Xiao Wang became a speed bump. Xiao Zhang became a mattress. Neither hesitated for even a fraction of a second. I gripped the wrench so tight my knuckles went white. Part of me wanted to turn around and go back. Swing that wrench until either the pig stopped moving or I did. But that would waste what they'd given me. They didn't scatter themselves into pieces so I could do something heroic and stupid. They did it so I could survive. I turned and ran. Got on the bus. The doors closed behind me. Inside, the bald driver was grinning ear to ear. That hit was beautiful. I saw the whole thing. Mission complete. I'm very satisfied? I got right in his face. Your intel was garbage. You said he probably hadn't gotten stronger. I nearly died because your 80-year-old information was wrong. My 2 soldiers fell apart, saving me out there. His grin evaporated. He scratched his bald head and had the decency to look genuinely ashamed. He'd watched the whole chase from his window, watched my skeletons sacrifice themselves, watched us barely escape, and he knew he'd screwed up. You're right. My fault, he said quietly. Tell me how to make it up to you. I hadn't expected that. Figured he'd make excuses since his revenge was already done. Maybe completing the mission had actually improved his opinion of me. Or maybe ghosts have honor codes I don't understand. Either way, I wasn't going to waste this moment on feelings. I held up the wrench. The 10-pound, 115 energy, name-targeted, grudge-powered weapon that had just cracked a pig demon's skull open. This is mine now. The bald driver gave up that wrench like it was a used tissue. Didn't even blink. Just waved his hand and said, "Sure, take it." That's when I realized I'd massively underplayed my negotiating hand. This weapon was worthless to him now. It was custom-built to bonk one specific pig named Wang Guoqing, and the bonking was done. To him it was junk. To me it was 150 points of Yin energy strapped to a medium-damage weapon that could actually hurt supernatural creatures. I'd basically asked for his trash, and he was relieved I hadn't demanded something expensive. The look of relief on his bald, sunglasses-wearing face told me everything. I could have asked for way more. Lesson learned. Next time a ghost owes you a favor, aim higher. The mission complete notification popped up and the fox fur blanket officially became mine. I yanked it off the wall with one hand. The same blanket that wouldn't budge an inch when I'd been pulling with both arms earlier. Apparently ghost property only moves when the ghost says so. 100 points, just like that. While I was riding high on my successful heist, I figured the driver's goodwill meter was probably maxed out, so I squeezed in a question that had been bugging me. Why did some objects carry Yin energy while the security guard's booth had almost nothing? The driver looked at me like I'd asked why water was wet. Items absorb Yin energy from prolonged ghost contact. That guard was a demon, not a ghost. Demons absorb moonlight essence, completely different energy system, so that's why the pigman stuff was clean. Different species, different energy. Ghosts leave Yin residue on everything they touch. Demons don't. Filed that away in my brain under critical survival knowledge, right next to don't make eye contact on haunted buses. I was about to leave when the driver called me back. He hesitated for a second, almost shy about it, then handed me a bus card. Not a regular one. This thing was a universal free pass for every ghost bus in existence, and it let me approach any ghost driver and request help. The cost of that help would need to be negotiated, but the card itself was the golden ticket. Without it, drivers wouldn't even acknowledge your existence. Considering that every ghost bus driver I'd encountered so far was powerful enough to terrify every other creature on their vehicle, having a VIP pass to their services was like getting a loyalty card for a mercenary guild. He told me I was the first person in all his years driving to actually help him. I thanked him and called him uncle. He told me to call him Big Brother. Some things are universal across the living and the dead. Nobody wants to feel old. I found an empty seat in the back and dumped my backpack on my lap to do inventory. 5 seat covers at 15 each, 75 Yin points. Fox fur blanket, 100. Revenge wrench, 150. Stolen electric baton, 50. Grand total, 375 Yin energy points from a single dungeon run. Plus 200 bonus points from the mission, a free bus card, and an empty bottle that could store 350 points of Yin energy for later. My territory owed 1,000 points. At this rate, I'd be debt-free in 2 or 3 runs. From there, develop the territory, wake up more skeletons, build the bone army of my dreams. The math was finally mateing. I spread everything out and started organizing my backpack like a kid sorting Halloween candy by tier. Seat covers rolled up tight, blanket folded, wrench wedged along the side, baton in the front pocket, trinkets from the guard booth tucked into corners. Every other player on this bus watched me arrange my collection of filthy, moldy, ghost-contaminated garbage and clearly thought I'd lost my mind. One guy even tugged at the seat cover next to him, found nothing special about it, and gave up trying to understand why I was hoarding bus upholstery like it was gold. They couldn't see the energy. To them, I was just a weirdo giggling over a pile of trash. And you know what? Even if I knew what they were thinking, I wouldn't have cared. If collecting haunted garbage was going to keep me alive in this horror game, I'd collect haunted garbage with pride and a smile on my face. The bus intercom crackled one final time. Next stop, terminal station. All passengers please prepare to exit. Don't forget your personal belongings and pets. Pets? On this bus? I decided not to question it. In the back row, Linya's head snapped up like someone had electrocuted him. The ghost student next to him turned with a grin that belonged in a nightmare. Uncle, time's almost up. Linya told him exactly where he could shove that reminder and went back to scribbling furiously on his test paper. 2 big questions left. His pen was moving so fast I swear I could see smoke rising from the paper. The man was speed-running a high school exam under threat of being consumed by a teenage ghost, and honestly, I respected the grind. Li Xiaoyu was doing fine now. Ever since he'd brought back the hanging rope, the ghost had stopped harassing him. Well, mostly stopped. The ghost was still dangling from the ceiling straps and kept accidentally kicking Li Xiaoyu in the head with his swinging feet. Li Xiaoyu asked him to come down since they were almost at the terminal. The ghost looked down at him with those bulging bloodshot eyes and said absolutely nothing. He liked it up there. Li Xiaoyu sighed and accepted his fate as a ghost footrest. Zhao Yixiao, the only player who never took an extra mission, sat quietly wrestling with his feelings. He'd spent the entire ride frozen in fear of my skeletons, then discovered they were harmless, then got angry, then got scared again, and now the dungeon was ending and he had nothing to show for it except 10 basic survival points and enough emotional trauma to fill a therapy session. He kept glancing at me, wondering where my skeletons had gone. He didn't know they'd sacrificed themselves. He didn't know they'd scattered into pieces so I could escape a pig demon. He just thought I'd dismissed them or something. Part of me wanted to explain, but a bigger part of me was too tired and too busy admiring my loot collection to bother. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and hugged my backpack full of haunted treasures. First dungeon, nearly done. Debt reduction plan, operational. Skeleton casualties, 2, temporary. Net emotional damage, surprisingly high for a guy who'd spent most of the ride unzipping seat covers. Not bad for day 1. Lin Yi finished his ghost homework with about 2 minutes to spare. 80% accuracy on a high school exam he hadn't studied for in years, completed under threat of being eaten alive by a teenage specter. The ghost student accepted the paper with the enthusiasm of someone receiving a parking ticket, muttered a reluctant, "Thanks," and the mission closed out. 50 points. Lin Yi wiped sweat off his forehead and looked like a man who'd just defused a bomb with a butter knife. Meanwhile, I was sitting in my seat hugging a backpack full of haunted bus parts and feeling like the richest garbage collector in the afterlife. The bus pulled into a dark courtyard and stopped without any announcement. Both doors opened. The bald driver, Su Mao, I'd learned his name was, grabbed a thermos and stepped out the front like a man clocking out of a shift. The ghost student walked off the back without looking at anyone. The hanging ghost floated out after one last lingering glance at Li Xiaoyu, probably debating whether to kick him in the head one more time for old time's sake. He chose mercy. Growth. The dungeon completion notification popped up for everyone. 10 basic points. Proceed to the exit immediately. The scenery behind the back door shifted into a wall of swirling fog. Zhao Yixiao shot me the most resentful look I'd ever received from a stranger, which was confusing because I genuinely could not remember a single interaction with this person, then disappeared into the mist. Li Xiaoyu passed by and gave me a respectful nod. We'd been through combat together, so I nodded back. Comrades in pig bonking. Lin Yi shuffled out next, still clutching his pen like a soldier who wouldn't let go of his rifle. I did one final sweep of the bus for anything carrying energy. Nothing left. I'd already picked this vehicle cleaner than a Thanksgiving turkey. As I headed for the back door, Su Mao called out from the front. Hey, you seem like a good kid. Take this. He lobbed something at me. A dirty, oil-stained, sweat-soaked rag came sailing through the air toward my face. My first instinct was to dodge because I am not, in fact, a garbage disposal. But then the tool tip appeared mid-flight. 100 energy points. My body moved before my pride could object. I snatched that disgusting rag out of the air like an outfielder catching a fly ball and stuffed it into my backpack with zero hesitation. Got any more? I called back shamelessly. Get out of here, he laughed. Name's Su Mao. See you around, kid. He disappeared out the front door to grab a few minutes of rest before his next route. I watched him go and thought, you know what? The man's bald as an egg and drives a bus full of monsters, but he's actually pretty decent. I walked into the fog whistling, 475 total energy points richer than when I'd woken up this morning with a beam of light through my ceiling and a system that showed up 20 years late. The fog cleared and I was back. My crumbling stone plaza, my weed-choked courtyard, my kingdom of dirt and bones. Home sweet haunted home. Before I even opened my eyes fully, I heard the familiar scratching of pen on paper. Ajuan was standing right in front of me, scribbling in his notebook like a journalist who'd been waiting at the airport for a celebrity arrival. I leaned over his shoulder to read. He didn't bother hiding it. New Lord, Year 1. The Lord entered the Shadow Realm for approximately 3 hours and returned safely. No visible injuries. Mental state appears good. First action upon return was reading over my shoulder, confirming curiosity is intact. Mental state confirmed good. Backpack was flat when he left and bulging when he returned. Contents unknown. He was writing my biography in real time. Every move I made, documented. Every observation, cataloged. I couldn't decide if this was endearing or slightly creepy, but honestly, having a personal historian who doubled as an accountant felt like the kind of luxury a Lord of Bones deserved. Then I heard it, that beautiful rattling clatter of skeleton feet on stone. Xiao Zhang and Xiao Wang came walking across the plaza toward me, fully reassembled, good as new. Well, good as they ever were, which wasn't saying much, but they were whole, intact, walking, not scattered across a sidewalk underneath a pig demon's rear end. Ajuan explained that skeletons reform in the graveyard as long as they haven't been purified by holy light. Essentially immortal cannon fodder. My brain immediately started running tactical scenarios. Send them into danger first. Use them as scouts. Have them trigger traps. Let them tank hits while I flanked with the wrench. The possibilities were incredible. Disposable soldiers who came back every time. I was practically vibrating with excitement. Then Ajuan calmly informed me that reassembly costs 50 energy per skeleton. Both of them had used their absorbed energy to rebuild themselves, so the 100 points they'd collected on the bus were gone. My excitement deflated like a balloon hitting a cactus. 50 points per resurrection meant I couldn't just throw them into a meat grinder every 5 minutes. There was a budget to consider. Even undead armies run on economics. But then I did the math again and realized I'd already written off their 100 points during the chase. I'd counted that energy as lost the moment they fell apart. So technically, I was exactly where I expected to be, minus no extra energy, plus 2 living soldiers. That was a net win in my book. I swung the backpack off my shoulders and started unpacking. Ajuan watched me pull out seat covers, a fox fur blanket, a greasy wrench, an electric baton, random desk trinkets, a stained rag, and an empty water bottle, all of it radiating enough dark energy to make the air around my backpack turn into visible black fog. I asked Ajuan how to extract the energy from everything. He didn't answer. I called his name again. Still nothing. I looked up and found something I never expected to see. Shock on a face that had no skin, no muscles, and no capacity for facial expressions. Somehow, through sheer force of disbelief, Ajuan's empty skull was radiating pure astonishment. His jaw hung slightly lower than usual. His ghost flame eyes burned a little brighter. He was stunned speechless, and this was a skeleton who literally never shut up. He pulled out his notebook and started writing with a speed and intensity one hadn't seen before. I caught the last few lines over his shoulder. Estimated energy brought back. No less than 300 points. Visible fog concentration in backpack. Across multiple generations of lords, this is the first time any lord has returned from their initial Shadow Realm expedition with this volume of resources. Note, the skeleton tomb may be returning to its former glory, former glory. Those two words hung in the air between us. My crumbling territory with its broken buildings and sleeping soldiers and debt-ridden energy reserves. It had once been something great, something powerful. And my undead accountant, who'd served through lord after lord, watched each one march into the dungeon and never come back, who'd recorded their failures and their deaths in that little notebook with the same neat handwriting. For the first time in who knows how many years, he'd written the word, glory, without crossing it out. I looked at my pile of haunted garbage, my two recently reassembled skeleton soldiers, and my wide-eyed military strategist, and I grinned. We were just getting started. Back at my glorious trash heap of a kingdom, I followed Azuin to the throne room to figure out how to cash in my loot. I expected some kind of ancient ritual, maybe a blood sacrifice, a chanting circle, possibly interpretive dance performed by skeletons under moonlight. Nope. Just sit on the throne and think the word extract. That's it. The entire mystical energy conversion system was basically a mental ATM. The throne glowed. The black fog got sucked out of my backpack like a ghostly vacuum cleaner, and a number appeared on my panel. 375 energy deposited. Balance remaining on my 1,000-point death mortgage. 625. Not bad for a guy whose entire financial strategy was steel bus upholstery. The downside? Once the energy was extracted, all my precious haunted collectibles became regular garbage. The seat covers were just dirty seat covers. The fox fur blanket was just a moldy blanket. The rag was just a rag. The romance was over. I tossed the covers and blanket to Xiao Zhang and Xiao Wang, who immediately started wrapping themselves in them like skeleton burritos. At least the wrench and electric baton kept their combat stats. Only the energy coating got stripped. Those were going back in the backpack as actual weapons. A garbage collector needs self-defense tools. Now came the big decision. What to do with 375 points? My first instinct was to dump everything into debt repayment and get that death timer off my back. Azuin recommended exactly that, with the passionate loyalty of an accountant who genuinely believes in fiscal responsibility. But then I checked the upgrade menu and discovered something that changed everything. My dried-up well. That sad little building producing 20 energy per day could be upgraded to level 2 for 200 points. At level 2, it would produce 50 per day. That meant it would completely cover the territory's daily maintenance cost, instead of falling 30 points short every single day. The main hall could also upgrade for 500 points and would add a training room where I could strengthen my own body using energy. Tempting, but way too expensive right now. The well upgrade was the obvious play. Stop the bleeding first, then worry about the debt. If I kept the well at level 1, I'd keep sinking deeper every day even while actively earning. Upgrade it, and at least the territory stops hemorrhaging resources. It was basic economics. The kind of thing any reasonable person would see immediately. Which made me wonder why Azuin, my so-called military genius strategist, hadn't suggested it first. I turned to him with what I hoped was a suspicious expression, though I'm not sure how intimidating you can look while sitting on a crumbling stone throne holding a greasy wrench. If upgrading the well is clearly better than dumping everything into debt, why didn't you just say so? The skeleton practically folded himself in half bowing. My lord, my loyalty is absolute and unwavering. He launched into this whole speech about how yes, the well upgrade helps short-term. But even at 50 daily production, the territory's 3 skeletons still consume 20 points per day just to stay awake. That leaves only 30 net per day, and with a 1,000-point debt hanging overhead, the real priority should be generating enough from dungeons to clear the balance entirely so the territory can actually expand and build new structures. He had a point. A really annoying, mathematically sound point. But wait, 20 points per day for 3 skeletons? I thought the daily upkeep was 50. Azuin explained that 50 was the territory maintenance. The skeleton consumption was on top of that. He and the 2 soldiers needed 20 additional points between them just to avoid falling asleep permanently. So the actual daily burn wasn't 50. It was 70. 70 points per day? My well produced 20. I was losing 50 points every single day just by existing. I sat on my throne and stared at the ceiling through one of the many holes in the roof, while the full horror of my financial situation crystallized in my brain. This wasn't a debt. This was a mortgage. A haunted, supernatural, skeleton-powered mortgage with compounding interest and a death penalty for default. And it was going to get worse. Because eventually, I'd need to wake up more skeletons to survive harder dungeons. More skeletons meant more daily consumption. More consumption meant I needed more energy. Getting more energy meant harder dungeons. Harder dungeons meant needing more skeletons. The cycle was endless. I was trapped in a pyramid scheme designed by the universe itself, and the product being sold was my own survival. Every way I turned, the math led to the same conclusion. I would never, ever have enough energy. No matter how many seat covers I stripped, no matter how many pig demons I bonked, no matter how many ghost bus drivers threw dirty rags at my head, the expenses would always grow to match the income. I was going to spend the rest of my existence in this horror game, frantically collecting ghost juice just to keep the lights on in a cemetery full of hungry skeletons who would literally fall apart without their daily energy allowance. Ajuin also casually mentioned that Xiao Zhang and Xiao Wang weren't even operating at full power. At full capacity, a single skeleton soldier consumed 20 points per day each. My 2 soldiers were currently running on a combined 5 because the territory was too broke to feed them properly. They were skeleton soldiers on a starvation diet. Their combat performance in the dungeon, the clumsy flailing, the slow reactions, the getting grabbed by the neck thing, that wasn't incompetence. That was malnutrition. If I ever actually powered them up to full strength, I'd need 40 points daily just for 2 basic foot soldiers. Add Ajuin's share and the territory upkeep, and I'd be burning through over 100 points every single day before breakfast. I leaned back on my throne, closed my eyes, and let out a long, slow exhale that I'm pretty sure the well would have been proud of. 20 years waiting for a cheat system. Finally got one. It came with 1,000 points of debt, a crumbling kingdom, 3 malnourished skeletons, and an economic model that was basically designed to keep me running on a hamster wheel forever. The system hadn't given me a shortcut to power. It had given me a small business with terrible margins and employees who ate the profits. And somehow, despite all of this, Ajuin had written in his notebook that the skeleton tomb might be returning to its former glory. Glory? Right. Ask me again after I figure out how to afford lunch for my army of 3. Alright, enough spiraling about ghost economics. The territory was mine whether I liked it or not. I was stuck in a horror game with no return ticket, and this crumbling cemetery was the only real estate I owned. Time to stop whining and start building. I gracefully avoided admitting I'd wrongly accused Ajuin of disloyalty approximately 2 minutes ago. You should have explained sooner, I said, with the confidence of a man who was definitely not deflecting blame. Ajuin, displaying the diplomatic skills of a skeleton who'd survived multiple lords, bowed and said it was entirely his fault for not being clearer. We both knew the truth. Neither of us acknowledged it. A beautiful working relationship was forming. I decided to upgrade the well first. Next dungeon wasn't for 3 days, and if I dumped 200 points into the well now, the upgraded production would cover the territory's daily maintenance going forward. That meant for 3 days, I'd only lose the skeleton crew's personal consumption instead of the full 70-point daily hemorrhage. Basic math. The kind Ajuin had been trying to guide me toward before I accused him of treason. We walked over to the well, still the same sad little structure with its rickety rain shelter, sitting in the middle of my weed-infested plaza like a lawn ornament that had given up on life. The mysterious well sire was apparently taking a nap because nobody exhaled dramatically at me this time. Small mercies. I opened the panel and hit upgrade. 200 points vanished from my account instantly, which physically hurt even though the currency was literally ghost farts extracted from stolen bus upholstery. Then thick fog erupted around the well and swallowed it completely. From inside the cloud came a symphony of construction sounds. Hammering, clanking, something that sounded like a skeleton accidentally dropping a plank on another skeleton's foot. The whole renovation took about 5 minutes, which was honestly faster than any contractor I'd ever heard of in either world. The fog cleared, and I barely recognized the place. The well had gone from sad hole in the ground with a stick over it to an actual structure. The rain shelter had doubled in size and grown 3 wooden walls, turning it into a proper room with one open side facing the main path. Two large water tanks flanked the interior. The well mouth itself had expanded and now featured a real crank-operated pulley system for drawing water. It looked like something from a functioning civilization instead of a post-apocalyptic yard sale. I walked over and peered down into the upgraded well, expecting the same gray fog as before. Instead, I saw something that made my brain stutter. Water. Real, actual, clear, reflective water sitting at the bottom. Not mist, not ghost juice, not some suspicious supernatural liquid. Clean water that I could see my own face in. The well that had been called, dried up well, since before I was born now had water in it. The notification confirmed it. Dried up well LV1 successfully upgraded to well house LV2. Daily production, 50 points. Added feature, drinkable well water. They even changed the name. It wasn't a dried up well anymore. It was a well house. My worst building had just gotten a promotion and a rebrand simultaneously. But wait, drinkable water? For whom? I turned to Ajuin. Since when do skeletons need to drink? He confirmed this had never happened before. Previous lords upgraded the well and only got increased production. No water. His theory was that the territory had customized itself because I was human and humans need hydration. The system had detected my biological requirements and adjusted the upgrade accordingly. Private customization. VIP treatment from a haunted property. My undead real estate was more thoughtful than most landlords in the living world. I ordered Xiao Zhang to draw up a bucket so I could taste test my new amenity. He grabbed the crank handle and started turning it with gusto, bones rattling with every rotation, producing a squeaky soundtrack that echoed across the empty plaza. The bucket came up full. He poured it into one of the tanks. I grabbed a ladle, scooped some out, and took a sip. Cold. Clean. Actually kinda sweet. This was better than some of the tap water I'd had back in the real world. I was about to comment on the flavor to Ajuin before remembering he was a skeleton and couldn't taste anything. Awkward. Right on cue, the well sighed again. That deep, tired, dramatic exhale from somewhere at the bottom. I listened carefully, no gurgling sounds, which meant whatever lived down there wasn't actually submerged in my drinking water, just coexisting with it. As long as my mysterious well tenant wasn't contaminating the supply, we could be roommates. Don't ask, don't tell. Account balance after the upgrade, 175 points. From that, I needed to cover 3 days of skeleton snacking, 20 points per day for Ajuin and the boys. 60 points gone before the next dungeon even started. I decided to throw 100 into debt repayment just to knock that intimidating 4-digit number down. Watching the debt counter drop from 1,000 to 900 felt like making a minimum payment on a credit card. Technically progress, emotionally meaningless. Remaining balance, 15 points. I was broke again. The cycle of ghost poverty continued. My stomach growled. In all the excitement of energy extraction, well upgrades, and financial planning for my skeleton empire, I'd completely forgotten that I was a human being who needed food. I sent Xiao Wang to collect firewood from the mountain. He tilted his skull in confusion, having no concept of what fire was for, but obediently jogged off. I told Xiao Zhang to fill the water tank and haul it to the main hall, so I wouldn't have to walk outside every time I was thirsty. Back in the throne room, I reached into my backpack and pulled out a packet of instant noodles. Salvation. I just needed to boil some water, and oh no, I didn't have a pot. I searched the entire hall. Nothing. Not a single cooking vessel in this entire territory. Ajuin confirmed that no previous lord had ever needed to eat, being skeletons and all, so the blacksmith had never forged anything kitchen-related. I was the first living lord this territory had ever had, and nobody had thought to stock a kitchen. For one horrible moment, I genuinely contemplated whether I might become the first lord in skeleton tomb history to die not from a dungeon monster, not from energy debt, but from starvation. Death by lack of cookware. My tombstone would read, had an army, had a throne, didn't have a pot. Then Ajuin gently reminded me that dungeon points could be used in the horror games shop. I slapped my thigh so hard it echoed off the stone walls. The shop. I'd earned 210 points total and had been so obsessed with energy that I'd completely forgotten the game had a store. I yanked open the shop menu and started scrolling. Pots, pans, rice, canned food, blankets, clothes, soap, all dirt cheap. The horror game might have been trying to kill me at every turn, but at least it offered affordable groceries. Even interdimensional death arenas understood that you can't terrify someone on an empty stomach. The horror game shop was the most unhinged shopping experience of my entire life across both worlds. Everything that wasn't combat-related cost practically nothing. 1 point for a complete outdoor survival kit, tent, sleeping bag, kerosene stove, pots, pans, bowls, utensils. 1 point for 2 tons of fresh vegetables. 1 point for 2 tons of meat. 1 point for 10 kilograms of gold. If I could somehow smuggle goods out of this death game, I'd be the richest man alive. Unfortunately, the only exit strategy involved not dying, which was looking increasingly expensive. I bought the survival kit, the cookware, the food supplies, and seasonings. Grand total, 5 points. 5 points for enough kitchen equipment and ingredients to open a restaurant. Meanwhile, a single steel knife in the weapons section cost 5 points by itself. The horror game's economic philosophy was crystal clear. Staying alive is cheap, but fighting for your life will bankrupt you. They wanted you comfortable and well-fed right up until the moment something ate you. The shop had a built-in warehouse feature too, which was surprisingly thoughtful for a system designed to torture people. Food stored inside stayed fresh indefinitely, no time passed in storage. So I could buy 2 tons of pork and pull out a single chop whenever I wanted without worrying about the rest going bad. My territory had gone from, no food exists here, to infinite frozen grocery store in about 30 seconds. I summoned the cookware, and it materialized in the throne room, crashing onto the floor from about half a meter up. Pots, pans, a stove, cutting boards, ladles, an entire kitchen's worth of equipment clattering across ancient stone tiles. Ajuin nearly jumped out of his bones. I put him on organizing duty immediately. Military strategist, historical record keeper, and warehouse manager. The man wore many hats. Well, no hats. No head skin to hold a hat. But metaphorically speaking, very versatile employee. With the daily necessities handled for a laughable 5 points, I still had 205 points burning a hole in my non-existent pocket. Time to go shopping for things that could actually keep me alive in future dungeons. I switched the shop category to weapons and skills, and the price tags hit me like a truck. Everything was obscenely expensive compared to the survival goods. A basic steel sword, 5 points. Decent skills started at 50 and went up from there. Powerful abilities cost hundreds. The math painted a grim picture that I probably should have realized sooner. The basic dungeon survival mission awarded 10 points. 10 points bought you 2 steel knives and nothing else. No skills, no defensive items, no upgrades. If all you ever did was the basic mission, you'd be stuck with starter-level equipment while the dungeons got progressively harder. You'd survive 2, maybe 3 runs before something killed you. The horror game wasn't just difficult. It was designed to force you into taking risks. The extra missions with their bigger rewards weren't optional side content. They were the only path to actual survival. The basic mission was a trap disguised as safety. Every player who chose the safe route was actually choosing a slow, comfortable death. Brutal, elegant, absolutely evil game design. I scrolled through the skill section looking for something that would synergize with my skeleton squad. If my whole deal was commanding undead soldiers, then the smartest investment was making those soldiers better rather than making myself marginally less terrible at personal combat. After filtering and browsing, I found exactly what I needed. War Frenzy, 150 points. Effect: target enters a frenzied state with boosted strength, speed, and physical size for 3 minutes. After the effect ends, the target becomes fatigued for 30 minutes. Also came with a free magic power stat of 100 points to fuel the casting. 3 minutes of supercharged skeleton action followed by 30 minutes of exhaustion. On paper, the drawback seemed significant. Half an hour of your fighter being useless after every use was a real cost. But my fighters were skeletons. Skeletons didn't get tired. They didn't have muscles to fatigue, no lungs to gasp, no stamina bar to deplete. The entire weakness of this skill was built around biological limitations that my troops literally did not possess. It was like finding a weapon with the drawback, causes severe sunburn, and handing it to creatures who lived underground and had no skin. But I wanted to be sure before dropping 150 points on a hunch. I turned to Ajuin, who was carefully stacking pans against the wall with the dedication of a man building a monument. Ajuin, do you ever get tired? he froze. His entire skeleton went rigid. He slowly straightened up to his full height, which wasn't very impressive, being a skeleton of average build, and turned to face me with an intensity that seemed wildly disproportionate to the question. His eye flames burned brighter. His jaw set with determination. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of a 1,000-year-old soul receiving its first act of kindness. "My lord, skeletons do not experience fatigue." He said it like he was swearing a blood oath. Like I'd just asked him if he'd die for me, and he was answering with his entire being. I'd literally just wanted to know if a buff spell's downside would apply to bone people, and this ancient skeleton interpreted it as me caring about his well-being. Apparently no previous lord had ever bothered to ask how he was feeling. 1,000 years of service across multiple lords, and not a single one had ever said, "Hey, you doing okay?" The bar for skeleton employee satisfaction was underground, and I'd somehow tripped over it by accident. I had no idea what emotional landmine I'd just stepped on, so I just nodded. "Cool. Good to know. Keep organizing." "Yes, my lord." He practically saluted with a frying pan. I bought War Frenzy. The skill slotted into my ability list alongside my 2 original talents, and a new magic power stat appeared on my panel, 100 points. Enough for 5 casts before I'd need to recharge somehow. With the remaining 50 points, I grabbed a clearance knife, a short blade similar to a Tang Dao, nothing fancy, no special effects, useless against ghosts but functional against physical creatures like that pig demon. 5 points. I also picked up a consecrated jade pendant for 15 points that could block 1 medium strength attack. A one-time use shield hanging around my neck. Not glamorous, but in a horror game, 1 blocked hit could be the difference between living and becoming a permanent resident. After all my shopping, I had 35 points left. Not enough for anything game-changing, so I pocketed the remainder for emergencies. From my tiny storage space, a complimentary gift for clearing the first dungeon, roughly the size of a shoebox. I pulled out the clearance knife and gave it a few test swings. Felt decent. Light, sharp, good balance. I didn't know any actual sword techniques, so my combat style would be limited to swing hard and hope for the best, but at least I had something beyond a 10-pound wrench for situations requiring finesse. Now I needed to test War Frenzy on a live, well, dead, target. Ajuin was right there, struggling to carry an empty grill shell across the room. For a skeleton military strategist, his physical stats were hilariously bad. Perfect test subject. War Frenzy. I cast it without warning. A wave of red energy slammed into Ajuin from behind. His bones erupted in crimson light. His frame expanded, 20 centimeters taller, broader shoulders, thicker bone structure. The blue ghost flames in his eye sockets flared and turned blazing red. The grill he'd been barely managing to drag suddenly weighed nothing in his hands. He whipped around with the grill raised like a weapon, ready to launch it at whatever had attacked him, and found me standing there grinning like an idiot. "How's it feel?" I asked. He lowered the grill slowly, ghost flames still burning red and hot. "That was you, my lord. I feel extraordinary. Strength has increased significantly. My awareness is sharper. Even my magical perception has expanded." I looked at my skeleton strategist, now 20 centimeters taller, glowing red, radiating an aura that actually felt intimidating for the first time since I'd met him, and started doing mental calculations. If this buff turned a scrawny bone wizard into something formidable, imagine what it would do to Xiao Zhang and Xiao Wang at full power. 3 minutes of enhanced skeleton rampage with 0 fatigue penalty afterward. Stack that with their immortal respawn ability and my neutral standing passive skill, and I was building something genuinely dangerous. The horror game had given me a mortgage, a garbage territory, and 3 malnourished skeletons. I was going to turn it into an empire. But first, I really needed to figure out how to cook instant noodles on a kerosene stove without burning down my only palace. Ajuin set the grill down in the corner like it weighed nothing and walked back to me, still glowing red, bones crackling with power. He flexed his skeletal fingers a few times, a gesture that would have looked cool on anyone with actual muscles, and delivered his field report. "My strength has at least doubled. Agility is noticeably improved as well. The size increase doesn't seem to provide any additional combat benefit beyond being larger." Solid feedback from my unwilling test subject. The skill worked exactly as advertised. Only problem was the light show. Ajuin was lit up like a skeleton-shaped Christmas decoration. Anyone with functioning eyes could tell he'd been buffed. Subtlety was not this skill's strong suit. But compared to the raw combat value, a little glow was a cosmetic issue I could live with. Now came the important part, the aftermath. I needed to see what happened when the 3-minute timer ran out. If skeletons somehow did experience the fatigue penalty, this 150-point investment would be significantly less game-breaking. So I stood there, staring at Ajuin, waiting. Ajuin stood there, staring back at me, wondering why his lord was watching him like a science experiment. Neither of us spoke. Two beings, one living human, 1,000-year-old skeleton, locked in the world's most uncomfortable staring contest, while a magical buff slowly ticked down. Somewhere in the background, a fire crackled. Wind blew through the holes in my ceiling. A skeleton strategist and his new boss just stood there, vibing in silence. Peak leadership. The red glow faded. Ajuin shrank back to normal size. His eye flames flickered from red back to their usual blue. I pounced immediately. How do you feel? Anything weird? Tired? Sluggish? Heavy? Sleepy? Anything at all? He paused, genuinely checking himself over like a patient at a doctor's office. No abnormalities, my lord. There was some minor discomfort from the rapid shift in power levels, but nothing resembling fatigue. Yes, I actually pumped my fist. The fatigue penalty, the entire reason this skill was priced at 150 instead of 500, was completely irrelevant to skeleton troops. War Frenzy on a human soldier meant 3 minutes of power followed by 30 minutes of being a useless sack of exhaustion. War Frenzy on a skeleton meant 3 minutes of power followed by absolutely nothing. No downside. No penalty. No cooldown that mattered. I'd found a premium combat buff at a discount price because the game developers never considered that someone might use it on creatures that physically could not get tired. And then my brain went to a darker place. A more beautiful, more terrible place. If skeletons couldn't get tired, and they didn't need to eat, sleep, or rest, and they'd work for nothing but a daily energy allowance, then what I had wasn't just an army. What I had was the most efficient labor force in the history of any world. Unlimited work hours. Zero complaints. No unions. No lunch breaks. No HR department. Just point at a task, and they'd do it until the heat death of the universe or until they physically fell apart, whichever came first. And even falling apart was temporary because they'd just reassemble in the graveyard. I was building a skeleton sweatshop, and I wasn't even sorry about it. The only dampener on my enthusiasm was the immediate realization that I had nothing for them to actually do. The territory was empty. No farms to work, no mines to dig, no walls to build. My tireless immortal workforce was currently qualified for exactly 3 tasks: carrying things, standing around, and playing peekaboo with terrified humans. The infrastructure would come eventually, but right now, having employees who never sleep was like owning a sports car with no roads. I also realized something strategically important while browsing the shop earlier. Lots of powerful skills had nasty side effects. Curses, health drain, temporary blindness, pain feedback. Things that would cripple a normal user. But skeletons didn't feel pain. Didn't have health in the traditional sense. Didn't have eyes to go blind. Half the debuffs in the game's skill catalog simply didn't apply to undead troops. This meant I could specifically hunt for high-powered, heavily discounted skills that other players avoided because of their drawbacks, and use them on my skeletons with zero consequences. War Frenzy was just the beginning. An equivalent buff without any drawback, something called Bloodlust, cost 500 points. I'd gotten essentially the same thing for 150. The skeleton loophole was going to save me a fortune. I filed this strategy under exploit mercilessly and told Ajuin to get back to organizing. He bowed and returned to his duties with renewed vigor. Whether that vigor came from the lingering buff effects or from his misguided belief that I'd asked about his well-being out of genuine concern, I chose not to investigate. With my remaining points, I picked up a short blade, a clearance knife, kind of like a compact Tang Dao. 5 points. No special effects, useless against ghosts, but perfectly functional for stabbing anything made of flesh. Also grabbed a consecrated jade pendant for 15 points, a one-time shield that could absorb a single medium-strength hit. Not flashy, but in a game where one surprise attack could end everything, having a get-out-of-death-free card hanging around my neck felt worth the investment. 35 points left in the bank. Not enough for anything major, so I saved them for emergencies. The horror game had also gifted me a storage space for clearing the first dungeon. I used the word space generously. It was roughly the size of a shoebox. I crammed the knife in there, and it was basically full. The jade pendant went around my neck. The wrench and baton stayed in the backpack. My entire arsenal fit in a school bag with room to spare for instant noodles. Truly terrifying. Exhaustion hit me like a wall. I'd been awake since the light beam punched through my bedroom ceiling, gotten dragged into a horror game, built a skeleton government, stripped a bus naked, fought a pig demon, negotiated with ghosts, and restructured my territory's finances. My body was done. I unrolled the sleeping bag from the survival kit right there on the throne room floor and crawled inside like a caterpillar entering a cocoon. I told Ajuin to wake me when the other two got back from their chores. Then I was out. 3 hours later, I opened my eyes to find 3 skeleton faces hovering directly above me, 6 blue flames staring down into my soul from approximately 8 inches away. My scream echoed off every stone wall in the palace. I told you not to crowd me when you wake me up. Ajuin apologized and shepherded the other two backward. Once my heart rate dropped below cardiac arrest levels, I noticed the throne room looked completely different. The floor was swept clean, debris gone, tools organized neatly against the walls, kitchen supplies arranged on a stone table, a pile of firewood stacked in the corner, a water tank positioned conveniently nearby, and in the center of the room, a crackling campfire, already lit and ready for cooking. I'd asked them to put away some tools. They'd renovated my entire living space. Ajuin had apparently decided that once I was asleep, don't take initiative no longer applied. He'd mobilized Xiao Zhang and Xiao Wang into a full cleaning crew and deep scrubbed the palace from floor to broken ceiling. For the first time since I'd arrived, the throne room actually looked like somewhere a person could live instead of somewhere a person went to feel depressed about their life choices. How long was I out? 3 hours, my lord. 3 hours. 3 skeletons. 0 breaks. They'd worked non-stop because they literally couldn't get tired, and the result was genuinely impressive. I looked around at the tidy room, the organized supplies, the warm fire, and I nodded. Good work. Xiao Zhang and Xiao Wang broke into their signature celebration, arms flailing, jaws clacking, doing what I could only describe as the skeleton victory dance. Ajuin gave a dignified bow and murmured that it was simply his duty. His notebook, I'm sure, told a different story. My stomach answered the moment of warmth with a thunderous growl that bounced off every wall. 10 hours without food. I pointed at the pot, and Xiao Zhang had it on the fire rack before I finished the sentence. I poured in well water, ripped open a packet of instant noodles, and dropped it in. Within minutes, the ancient stone throne room of the skeleton tomb was filled with the glorious, deeply anachronistic smell of beef-flavored ramen. I sat by the fire, slurping noodles from a bowl, surrounded by 3 skeletons who watched me eat with the fascinated intensity of creatures who had never once in their existence understood the concept of hunger. The campfire painted flickering shadows across their bones. Outside, the gray sky darkened toward night. Inside, a human lord ate cheap noodles on the floor of a ruined palace while his undead staff sat in a perfect semicircle around him like kids at story time. If anyone had walked in at that exact moment, they would have had absolutely no idea what they were looking at. Honestly, neither did I. But the noodles were good, the fire was warm, and for the first time since arriving in this world of debt and bones, I felt something dangerously close to home. After dinner, I sat by the fire with Ajuin and asked the question that had been bugging me since I first saw this dump. So what happened here? How did this place end up? Looking like a demolition site that gave up halfway through, Ajuin stared into the flames, and for the first time since I'd met him, the little ghost fires in his eye sockets went still. When a skeleton gets quiet and contemplative, you know you're about to hear something heavy. My lord, this territory was once powerful beyond anything you can imagine. And then he told me the story. And honestly, it was the most epic, heartbreaking, infuriating tale I'd ever heard, and I once read a novel where the dog died at the end. The Third Lord, the Golden Age ruler, had been an absolute monster of a leader. Under his command, the skeleton tomb had expanded into a full-blown empire. He'd carved open a permanent connection to the Shadow Realm, built up an army of over 100,000 skeleton soldiers, staffed it with skeleton mages, archers, warlocks, and dozens of skeleton generals. He had 3 frostbone dragons, actual dragons made of bones and ice magic, the kind of thing that shows up as the final boss in video games, plus thousands of skeleton warhorses and griffins. This wasn't a territory. This was a superpower, a skeletal civilization that could steamroll anything in its path. I was sitting there with my mouth hanging open, doing mental comparisons. My army, 2 basic infantry skeletons and an accountant. His army, 100,000 troops with air support. We were technically the same franchise. The gap was so enormous it was almost funny. Almost. So how did he lose? I asked, because obviously he lost. I was sitting in the ruins of his success eating instant noodles. Ajuin's voice went flat. He grew too fast. The old powers deep in the Shadow Realm noticed. For Ghost Kings, ancient, terrifying entities who'd been lurking in the dark corners of the spirit world, decided the skeleton tomb had gotten too big for its britches. They formed an alliance and launched a coordinated surprise attack from 4 directions simultaneously. East, west, north, south. Everything at once. The eastern front fell first. The Frostbone dragons, those legendary, world-ending weapons of mass destruction, were wiped out in a single night. Not captured, not driven back. Killed. All 3. Their dragon souls didn't even make it home. Just gone. I felt that loss in my chest, and I'd never even met a bone dragon. Then the western front collapsed. The enemy cut off the territory's mithril mines, the only source of material for weapons and armor. Without new equipment, the skeleton soldiers' gear started falling apart. Swords went dull. Shields cracked. Armor rusted and crumbled. An army of 100,000 slowly becoming an army of 100,000 unarmed bone piles. The war lasted 10 years. 10 years. The Third Lord fought it personally, leading from the front, refusing to give ground. 7 times he rode out to battle. 7 times he came back broken. First campaign. Came back with cracks in every piece of armor. Second, more scars on his bones than original bone. Third, lost his entire left arm. Had it reattached. Went back out the next day. 5th campaign. Half his ribcage was blown to pieces. He rested for 3 days in this very throne room, the one I was sitting in right now, eating ramen, then stood up and marched out again. 7th campaign, he didn't come back. Ajuin said it quietly, like he'd said it before, maybe to himself, maybe to previous lords, but the weight of it never got lighter. The firelight flickered across his empty skull, and those little blue flames in his eyes trembled slightly. A 1,000-year-old skeleton, still carrying the grief of a war he'd survived, and his lord hadn't. But the Third Lord didn't go quietly. In his final battle, he personally killed 3 of the 4 Ghost Kings. One he cut down face to face on the battlefield. One he dragged into a energy storm and took them both out in a mutual destruction attack. The last one he killed by detonating his own soul fire, the ghost equivalent of a nuclear self-destruct, vaporizing the Ghost King so completely that nothing remained. 3 kings dead. The 4th ran away with whatever was left of his army. 3-for-1 trade. The most expensive victory in the history of the skeleton tomb. But a victory that cost you your king isn't really a victory. With the Lord gone, the army lost its commander. Formation collapsed. Morale evaporated. The surviving 4th Ghost King recovered, rallied every small faction that had beef with the territory, and launched a counterattack. The skeleton forces, exhausted, unequipped, leaderless, fighting as individuals instead of an army, were picked apart piece by piece. Survivors scattered. Some were captured. Some were destroyed. Some fell into the eternal sleep that comes when energy runs out. And that was how a 100,000-strong empire with frost dragons and griffins became a broke graveyard with 3 starving skeletons and a well that sighed. The 4th Lord inherited the wreckage. No debt yet, but the Shadow Realm was watching closely. Everyone remembered what the skeleton tomb had been, and nobody wanted it to rise again. He lasted less than a year before dying in a dungeon. The lords after him managed varying degrees of slightly better than complete failure, but none came close to restoring the territory. Each one eventually marched into the Shadow Realm with big ambitions and didn't come back. The last one borrowed 200 energy from Ajuin, promised to return it double, and was never heard from again. I was starting to notice a pattern, and I did not like it. So basically, I said slowly, every single lord before me is dead, Ajuan tried to be reassuring. As long as you don't rush things, the danger is manageable. Or if you prefer, once the debt is cleared, you could put us into hibernation. That would reduce costs to zero, and you'd just need to survive the dungeons on your own. I appreciated the offer, but what would be the point? I'd have a territory with no one in it. A lord with no subjects. Just me, alone, in a graveyard, eating instant noodles until something in a dungeon finally killed me. No thanks. The skeletons stayed awake. The territory stayed active. I'd just have to be smarter than the lords who came before me, which based on the track record of, they all died, shouldn't be that hard. Low bar. Very low bar. Underground bar, buried next to the previous lords. Ajuan was right about one thing though, no rushing. Slow and steady. Build up carefully. Don't attract attention. Don't poke the ghost kings. Don't be a hero. Just survive. I crawled back into my sleeping bag and gave my final orders for the night. Keep the fire going. Don't let it go out because the door was broken and wind came straight through. And please, for the love of everything unholy, don't accidentally set my sleeping bag on fire. I did not want to go down in Ajuan's notebook as the first lord to die by campfire incident. I pulled my eye mask on and settled in for my first night as lord of a bankrupt skeleton kingdom. Behind me, I heard the scratch of pen on paper. Ajuan was writing again. I didn't look. I was too tired. But if I had, I would have seen the last line he wrote that night, the conclusion of his first day report on his new lord. The lord has no ambition for conquest, but possesses a strong will to live. In my assessment, a lord who stays alive is a good lord, followed by a practical postscript. The door really does need fixing. We'll find boards tomorrow, somewhere outside, the well side in the darkness. Xiao Zhang added a log to the fire. Xiao Wang stood guard at the broken door, staring into nothing, because that was all there was to stare at. And their new lord, a human in a sleeping bag on a stone floor, surrounded by 3 skeletons and the ghosts of 100,000 soldiers who would never march again. Slept soundly for the first time since a beam of light had punched through his bedroom, ceiling, and changed everything. I slept like a dead man, which felt appropriate given my living situation. The horror game sleeping bag was genuinely excellent. Warm, comfortable, 0 complaints. When I opened my eyes, all 3 skeletons were sitting in the exact same positions they'd been in when I fell asleep. They hadn't moved an inch. 8 hours of 3-boned people silently watching me snore in the dark. I chose not to think about how unsettling that was and instead said, "Good morning," like this was all perfectly normal. Ajuan had water ready before I even stood up. Toothbrush laid out. Everything prepared. Say what you want about skeleton aesthetics. The customer service was 5 stars. I brushed my teeth, grabbed bread and milk from the shop warehouse, and walked outside chewing breakfast to survey my empire in the daylight. First destination, the graveyard, because that's where my future army was sleeping. Rows and rows of dirt mounds stretching across the territory, each one containing a skeleton soldier waiting to be woken up. My retirement fund and my military budget buried in the same place. Very efficient. I kicked a rock and asked Ajuan something that had been nagging me. Can only the regular soldiers not talk? Or is it everyone? Just the basic soldiers, my lord. They were ordinary people in life. After becoming skeletons, their soul energy is too weak for speech. Made sense. Xiao Zhang and Xiao Wang were grunts. No voice, no complex thoughts, just enthusiastic bone clacking and unquestioning loyalty. Honestly, they communicated pretty well for guys who couldn't form words. I understood at least 60% of their jaw movements, which was better than some human conversations I'd had. If those 2 were fully powered up, how strong would they be? Ajuan thought for a moment. Approximately white bone rank, equivalent to fierce ghost level in the shadow realm. That led to a whole explanation of the spirit world's power hierarchy, which I desperately needed because I'd been stumbling through this death game with 0 understanding of who could kill whom. 7 tiers: wandering spirit, fierce ghost, vengeful wraith, evil ghost, ghost general, ghost king, ghost emperor. Based on my dungeon experience, the hanging ghost was probably fierce ghost tier. The pig security guard and bald driver Su Mao were somewhere between fierce ghost and vengeful wraith. And me? The horror game rated me at E, the absolute basement. A participation trophy with legs. But if Xiao Zhang and Xiao Wang could reach fierce ghost level at full power, that meant my basic infantry was actually decent. Elite among cannon fodder. The Honda Civics of skeleton soldiers. Nothing flashy, but reliable and surprisingly capable when properly maintained. Then I spotted it. A grave noticeably bigger than the rest, sitting like a boulder among pebbles. I pointed at it. That's a skeleton general, right? Ajuan nodded with something that might have been reverence. General Zhang Beichuan. Silverbone rank, equivalent to Ghost General. Now we were talking. A Ghost General under my command could carry me through dungeons while I focused entirely on collecting yin energy. I could practically taste the lazy, delegated lifestyle. How much to wake him up? Ajuan paused. The pause was never good. At minimum, 3,000 yin energy points. My soul left my body for a second. 3,000. I'd nearly died fighting a pig demon and stripping a bus ball to earn 375. Reviving one general cost 8 entire dungeon runs of maximum effort. And that was just the wake-up fee. After that, I'd need to feed him daily. Realistically, stabilizing a single general would cost 5 or 6,000 total. Forget I asked. Ajuan then cheerfully walked me through the complete price list for every unit type in the graveyard, like a car salesman showing me models I couldn't afford. Basic soldiers, 100 each. Cheap, reasonable, within budget eventually. Skeleton archers and mages, 150 to 200. A bit steep, but manageable. Squad leaders and captains, 3 to 500 each, mages even more. The generals varied by strength. The cheapest was 3,000, and the most expensive was some kind of forbidden spell-casting archmage whose revival cost 8,000 yin energy points. 8,000. I'd need to rob approximately 21 haunted buses to afford that. And the bone dragons? Don't even ask. 10,000 each minimum. Plus they required a special building called a dragon nest that probably cost another fortune to construct. The territory at its peak had only ever managed 3, which told me everything I needed to know about how absurdly expensive these things were. I walked through that graveyard feeling like a broke college graduate touring a luxury car dealership. Everything was beautiful, everything was powerful, everything was completely and utterly out of my price range. My grand ambitions of skeleton army domination were going to take slightly longer than expected. By slightly, I mean possibly years. I was heading back toward the plaza, thoroughly deflated, when Ajuan suddenly spoke up. My lord, there is one type of skeleton I'd recommend reviving first. I turned around, interest flickering back to life. What kind? He pointed toward the very edge of the graveyard, where a row of tiny mounds sat apart from the rest. These weren't soldier graves. They were barely bumps in the dirt, like someone had buried a collection of shoes. These are the non-combat skeletons. Life profession types. Blacksmiths, carpenters, craftsmen. They have 0 fighting ability, so revival costs are very low and daily maintenance is minimal. He paused. I believe there's a chef among them. A chef. A skeleton who could cook for me. No more fumbling with kerosene stoves and instant noodles. No more trying to figure out how to boil water without burning down my only building. A dedicated kitchen professional who worked for 5 yin energy points per day, never needed sleep, never complained about working conditions, and presumably couldn't even taste the food, so there'd be no arguments about seasoning. Lead the way. Now, Ajuan navigated through the tiny mounds, checking each one until he found the right grave. He'd never actually met this chef. No previous lord had needed food, so the poor cook had been buried here since forever, completely forgotten. The ultimate unemployment. Not fired, not retired, just literally underground because nobody needed lunch. The grave was pathetically small, less of a burial site and more of a suggestion that someone might be under there. I checked the revival cost, 20 yin energy points. 20. That was cheaper than reassembling Xiao Zhang after he got sat on by a pig. Daily upkeep, 5 points. For a personal chef. The economics of skeleton labor continued to amaze me. Do it. The dirt shifted. Bones rattled beneath the surface. A skeletal hand punched through the soil like a zombie movie. Fingers spread wide. Dramatic entrance. Very theatrical. I waited for the rest of the skeleton to emerge triumphantly from its centuries-long nap. The hand stopped moving. Then, from underground, a creaky old voice wheezed out. Oh, these old bones have got no strength left. Someone give me a pull. My first employee hire was stuck in his own grave and needed help getting out. The skeleton tomb's glorious return to power was off to a spectacular start. I waved at Xiao Zhang and Xiao Wang. Help him out. Then I turned to Ajuan with the obvious question. How come this one can talk? Ajuan explained that life profession skeletons retained their pre-death intelligence and skills because their whole point was using specialized knowledge. A chef who forgot how to cook was just a regular pile of bones with a hat. Made sense. Combat skeletons only needed to hit things, so they got downgraded to jaw-clacking idiots. Utility skeletons kept their brains and their voices. Different job requirements, different resurrection packages. 2 minutes of digging later, my soldiers dragged the skeleton chef out of his hole, like pulling a stubborn carrot from the world's most depressing garden. He flopped onto the ground, shook dirt off his bones, and immediately dropped to his knees. Many thanks, my lord. I stared at him. This skeleton had a mustache. 2 little black whiskers sitting right where a mustache would be on a living face. His bone frame was noticeably wider than the soldier's too. This guy had clearly been a big man in life. Probably the kind of chef who sampled everything he cooked. The mustache was actually helpful because without it, I'd have zero chance of picking him out of a skeleton lineup. Xiao Zhang, Xiao Wang, and generic cooking bones would all look identical from 10 feet away. At least Mustache Chef was visually distinct. Get up, get up. No kneeling. So you were a chef in your previous life? He stood, bowed with his hands clasped, an extremely old-fashioned gesture, and said, Indeed, my lord. I served as chief kitchen officer of the Imperial Culinary Bureau under the Liang dynasty. Liang dynasty? Like spring and autumn period Liang? No, my lord. The emperor I served was named Xiao Yan. My brain dug through 15 years of mandatory history education. Oh, Southern Dynasty's Liang. The one from the North-South period. I looked at him with new appreciation. Dude, you've been buried here for like 1,500 years, 15 centuries underground. No previous lord had needed food, so nobody had bothered waking up the cook. He'd been lying in a shallow grave for a millennium and a half while lords came and went above him, fighting wars, building empires, dying in dungeons, and nobody once thought, hey, maybe we should dig up the chef. The ultimate career gap on a resume. Employment history. Imperial cook, 502 to 549 AD. Then nothing. For 1,500 years. Reason for leaving previous position. Died. Became skeleton. Was immediately buried by people who didn't eat. Then it hit me. This man's cooking knowledge was from the 6th century. Stir-frying wasn't even invented until the Song dynasty, hundreds of years after he died. His entire culinary repertoire predated most of the cooking techniques that modern Chinese food was built on. I'd just spent 20 energy to hire a chef whose idea of cutting-edge cuisine was put thing over fire, hope for best. Was I going to have to teach him how to cook? Because my own kitchen skills peaked at boil water, add noodle packet, wait 3 minutes. We'd be the blind leading the boneless. I made an executive decision. Opened the horror game shop and bought a complete set of modern cookbooks. Every technique, every recipe, every cuisine. The books materialized in a stack so tall that Xiao Zhang and Xiao Wang had to carry them together, staggering under the weight of 1,000 years of culinary progress. I pointed at the pile and told Mustache Chef, read all of these. Learn modern cooking. You've got 2 days. He looked at the tower of books, then back at me, jaw hanging open. He started to say something. Probably, do I really have to read all of? But I was already walking away. 20 energy spent, decision made, no refunds. For the next 2 days I'd survive on instant noodles while my new hire speed ran through 15 centuries of recipe development. Hopefully by the time the next dungeon rolled around, I'd come home to something better than cup ramen. With the chef situation handled, I swung by the dungeon portal to check the timer. 2 days until the next run. Nothing to do there. But as I turned around, my eyes landed on the mountain behind the territory, the barren hill with a few scraggly trees clinging to its slopes like they'd lost a bet. Ajuan, what used to be up there? The original main hall, my lord. It was destroyed during the war and rebuilt at the current location. The original throne room of the Third Lord, the legendary giant skeleton who'd commanded 100,000 troops and killed 3 ghost kings. Of course I had to see it. What else was I doing? My schedule was wide open. My entire to-do list consisted of wait and try not to starve. The climb nearly killed me. The mountain looked short from below, the classic optical illusion that has been murdering hikers' expectations since the invention of legs. Loose rocks everywhere, no path, no handrails, just raw scrambling up a slope that seemed to get steeper the higher I went. I estimated 30 minutes to the top. An hour later, I was gasping for air at the halfway point, bent double, hands on my knees, questioning every life choice that had led me to voluntarily climb a hill in a skeleton dimension. Ajuin stood next to me looking completely unbothered, because of course he did. No lungs, no muscles, no sweat glands. He tucked his notebook under his arm and steadied me with one bony hand. Once you upgrade the main hall, you can use energy to strengthen your body, right? Another thing locked behind a paywall I couldn't afford. 500 energy for the main hall upgrade, added to the list of things I desperately needed but couldn't buy. Right between Skeleton General and Bone Dragon, I wheezed my way to the summit with Ajuin basically carrying me the last stretch. At the top was a flat clearing with nothing on it except a massive stone throne, half collapsed, covered in faded carvings. The thing was enormous. I didn't even reach halfway up its seat. The third lord had been a giant-type skeleton, at least 3.5 meters tall. His throne was built to match. Everything else from the original palace was gone, completely obliterated. Only the throne survived, probably because decades of energy absorption had hardened it beyond what any weapon could destroy. A monument to a leader who'd given everything and still lost. I walked past the throne to the mountain's edge and looked down. My jaw dropped. The territory stretched out far beyond what I'd explored. Behind the dungeon portal, vast tracts of land extended into the distance, dotted with ruins of buildings I'd never seen. Collapsed walls, shattered foundations, the bones of a civilization that had once filled every inch of this space with purpose. Ajuin appeared beside me. The territory expands as the main hall levels up. Those areas are currently inaccessible. At level 5, they'll start opening. Level 5. I was at level 1 and couldn't afford level 2. The territory I could see from up here was maybe 10 times what I currently had access to. An entire kingdom, locked behind upgrade gates, waiting for a lord with enough resources to turn the key. Every ruin down, there was a building that could be restored. Every empty field was a space that could house troops, workshops, training grounds. I looked out at all that potential, all that land, all those ruins, all that history, and said the only reasonable thing a broke lord standing on a mountain of broken dreams could say. One step at a time, I guess. By the time I got back to the throne room, Mustache Chef was already practicing his wok skills, tossing sand around in a pan like a skeleton Gordon Ramsay warming up for service. The moment he saw me, he dropped everything and scurried over with his bony hands clasped together, practically groveling. "My lord, could I please have some ingredients to work with?" Cooking wasn't just his job, it was his passion. 1,500 years underground, and the first thing he wanted to do was get back in the kitchen. I respected that kind of dedication, even if the dedication came from a mustache skeleton who'd been dead since the fall of the Liang dynasty. I waved my hand and summoned a mountain of ingredients and seasonings from the shop warehouse onto the stone table. 1 point for enough food to feed a restaurant for a month. Ghost economy pricing continued to be absolutely unhinged. Go nuts. Learn fast. He grabbed the seasoning bottles like a kid on Christmas morning and sprinted back to his cooking station. I had high hopes. Imperial chef background, centuries of culinary wisdom, plus modern cookbooks and unlimited ingredients. What could go wrong? Everything. Everything went wrong. 2 days of taste testing his experiments nearly destroyed my tongue. The man had never seen soy sauce before in his life. He'd never encountered chili flakes, oyster sauce, or MSG. His approach to modern seasonings was somewhere between scientific experiment and throwing darts blindfolded. One dish was so salty I thought he was trying to preserve me for winter. Another was so bland it tasted like boiled apology. And he kept adding weird, ancient ingredients that hadn't been used in cooking for literally 1,000 years. Things that I couldn't identify and didn't want to. My mouth went numb by day 2 and stayed that way. So when the dungeon timer hit 0 and I gathered everyone at the portal entrance, I had some parting words specifically for the chef. I looked him dead in the eye sockets and said, "By the time I get back, you'd better know how to cook, or I'm putting you back in the ground." He wiped non-existent sweat from his non-existent forehead. "Absolutely, my lord." Without question, I gave Ajuin orders to supervise the chef's training. because apparently my military strategist duties now included quality control for a skeleton cooking school, and stepped through the portal. I expected darkness, fog, creepy atmosphere, the Shadow Realm's usual gloomy welcome package. Instead, I got sunshine, a warm, orange sunset hanging over the skyline of a perfectly normal-looking residential neighborhood. Apartment buildings, paved roads, trimmed hedges. A sign at the gate read, Houting Community, West Entrance. Where's the Shadow Realm? Why is there a sun? This dungeon was set in the living world. The regular, human, daytime world. Which meant one devastating realization: no Yin energy. Yin energy came from ghost-touched objects in the spirit realm. This suburban neighborhood probably had about as much Yin energy as a yoga studio. Half my reason for entering dungeons had just evaporated. I sighed deeply enough to make my well proud and pulled up the mission screen. Dungeon name: Community Night Watch. Type: Survival. Difficulty: C rank. 1 full letter grade harder than the bus. Basic mission: serve as the night security guard at the West Gate. For 2 consecutive nights, do not allow any non-human entity to enter the community. Reward: 20 points. Double the last dungeon's basic payout, which was nice. Extra mission 1. Correctly identify and admit human residents. 5 points per successful entry. But if I let a non-human through by mistake, minus 20 points. The math was brutal. 4 correct identifications to earn 20 points, but 1 mistake wiped all of that out, and then some. Extra mission 2. Residents might call for help with problems. If I chose to respond, I had to complete it. Failure meant getting complaints, which I assumed was dungeon speak for something much worse than a bad Yelp review. The tips were ominous. You have a guard booth, a security monitor, a resident registry, and a flashlight. And then, don't trust your eyes. Some things look human, but aren't. I processed all of this while staring at the guard booth. A guard booth. I was being assigned to work as a security guard. The exact same job as Wang Guoqing, the 400-pound pig demon I'd smashed in the skull with an 80-year grudge wrench approximately 3 days ago. The universe had the most vicious sense of humor imaginable. From bus seat thief to pig bonker to the very profession I'd just assaulted. The circle of horror game life. An old man in a security uniform walked out of the booth and waved at me. Xiao Su, what are you standing around for? Shift change. The dungeon had given me a cover identity. I was Xiao Su, the night shift replacement. I jogged over before whatever punishment existed for tardiness could kick in. The old guard walked me through the handoff with the bored efficiency of someone who'd done this 10,000 times. Uniform in the closet, gate remote in the drawer, flashlight and rubber baton in the cabinet. Dinner in the microwave. He looked at my face, judged me to be young enough to survive the night, and added one final warning. You can play on your phone, but absolutely no sleeping. They'll fine you. Then he grabbed his thermos and shuffled into the community, leaving me alone at the West Gate as the sun continued its descent toward the horizon. 6 p.m. 12 hours until shift change. 2 nights of this. I changed into the security uniform, which fit surprisingly well for horror game standard issue, and sat down at the desk. Grabbed the rubber baton, turned it over in my hands, waited for a tooltip to appear. Nothing. No stats, no special effects, no Yin energy. Just a regular piece of rubber-coated stick. I tossed it on the desk. Decoration. The monitor showed rotating camera feeds from around the community. Nothing unusual yet. The gate was quiet. The streets were empty. It felt almost peaceful, which in horror game terms meant something terrible was about to happen. I reread the mission description carefully, looking for loopholes, and found one so beautiful I nearly applauded myself. The extra mission rewarded me for letting humans in. It punished me for letting non-humans in. The basic mission required me to keep all non-humans out. But here was the thing. Nowhere in any of the rules did it say I was required to let anyone in. Not humans, not ghosts, not anything. The mission said, don't let non-humans enter. It didn't say, you must admit all humans. Those were 2 completely different instructions, and only one was mandatory. So what if I just didn't open the gate? For anyone? Ever? If nobody entered, then no non-humans could enter. Basic mission, automatically completed. Extra mission points, sacrificed, but who cared? I'd rather lose bonus points than accidentally admit a monster wearing a human skin suit and get 20 points docked per mistake. But the real genius was phase 2 of my plan. I could see energy on objects. If someone approached the gate carrying items that radiated energy, they were almost certainly not human. Humans didn't walk around with ghost-contaminated belongings. So instead of trying to figure out who was real and who was a disguised monster using vague visual clues, I'd just scan their stuff. Energy glow equals non-human. No glow equals probably human, but still not getting let in because I'm not opening this gate for anyone. And the non-humans? I'd find excuses to get close, inspect their belongings, maybe confiscate a few energy-carrying items for security purposes, and send them on their way. Rob the ghosts, protect the community, collect energy, complete the mission. All from a comfortable chair in a heated guard booth with a microwave dinner and a phone. I leaned back in my chair and grinned at the ceiling. I'm a genius. The sun dipped lower. The shadows grew longer. Somewhere in the community, things that weren't human were starting to stir. And at the west gate, the newest security guard in horror game history sat behind his desk with a flashlight, a useless rubber baton, and a plan so beautifully lazy that it might actually work. Turns out I wasn't the only security guard on duty. The dungeon had assigned 4 players to 4 gates: north, south, east, and west. I got west. Somewhere out there, 3 other poor souls were sitting in identical guard booths having identical existential crises about how to handle ghost residents trying to get into an apartment complex. What I didn't know at the time was that the East Gate guy, some player named Zhao Yuanqi, had come up with the exact opposite strategy to mine. His logic went like this: let in 5 humans, earn 25 points. Accidentally let in 1 ghost, lose 20. Net profit, 5 points. As long as more humans showed up than ghosts, which seemed mathematically likely, he'd come out ahead no matter what. So his plan was to literally open the floodgates. Everyone gets in. Humans, ghosts, demons, mailmen, stray cats, whatever. Volume strategy. Quantity over quality. The man was running a nightclub door policy at a haunted apartment complex. Meanwhile, I was running maximum security prison rules. Nobody gets in. I don't care if you're the Pope carrying a notarized birth certificate and 3 forms of photo ID. This gate is closed. Go find another entrance or sleep on the sidewalk. My reasoning was equally sound. If nobody enters, no non-humans can enter. Basic mission automatically passes. 0 risk, 0 effort, 0 stress. I'd sacrifice the bonus points from admitting humans and focus entirely on what actually mattered to me: scanning non-human visitors for energy items I could confiscate. I summoned Xiao Zhang and Xiao Wang and stuffed them under the bed in the guard booth. This was a normal human neighborhood, and the last thing I needed was 2 skeleton soldiers standing at the gate scaring residents into cardiac arrest. They'd stay hidden unless something went wrong. Emergency reserves. My secret bone weapons tucked under a mattress like monsters under a kid's bed, except these monsters were on my payroll. 7 o'clock. Full dark. The first wave of residents started arriving. People coming home from work, carrying briefcases and grocery bags, looking tired and completely ordinary. They swiped their access cards at the gate, the turnstile beeped, and they walked through without even glancing at me. I stood by the entrance watching each one pass. No energy on any of them. Just regular humans going home to regular apartments. The card system was basically a built-in human verification tool. If you had a card, you were legit. My job only mattered for people without cards. I was about to head back inside to check the monitors when I heard it. "Hey there, handsome." The voice arrived before the person did. Sweet, syrupy, dripping with artificial charm. I turned around and saw a woman walking toward me out of the darkness, and I mean she was walking. Full runway strut. Black spaghetti strap dress cut, so short it was basically a suggestion. Plunging neckline. Red lipstick. Hair bouncing with every click of her high heels on the pavement. She looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine and into the wrong neighborhood. My eyes did a quick scan. First thing I checked, shadow. She had one. That was a good sign, classic ghost detection method. Then I checked her accessories. Necklace, bracelet, small handbag. I waited for the energy tooltips to pop up. Nothing. Everything on her was clean. Ordinary jewelry, ordinary bag, 0 supernatural residue. Disappointing from a loot perspective, but at least it meant she probably wasn't carrying anything I could steal. Not that it mattered. Human or not, she wasn't getting through my gate. "Handsome, I forgot my access card. Could you open the gate for me?" She leaned forward half a step. unleashing a cloud of perfume so thick it had its own zip code. Her eyes locked onto mine with a look that said, "I am being cute on purpose, and it usually works." I stepped back. "Sorry, gate's broken." She blinked. The cute act flickered like a TV losing signal. "What? Broken? Can't open it. Try another gate. Or call someone to bring your card." The transformation was instantaneous. The sweet, breathy voice vanished. The flirty eyes went flat. She straightened up, crossed her arms, and her whole demeanor shifted from damsel in distress to, "I want to speak to your manager." "Are you serious? It's just opening a gate. Is that really such a big deal?" She had a point, technically. Under normal circumstances, a security guard absolutely should let a resident in after checking their registration. That was literally the job description. The old guard had even explained the process. No card, just have them sign in, open the gate, done. Previous guards apparently didn't even bother with the sign-in part. One sentence, and they'd let anyone through. And to be fair, she'd only pulled the flirty act because she thought I was cute, not because she was a supernatural predator. Probably. Maybe. I wasn't going to find out. Gate's broken. Nothing I can do. Her face cycled through 3 shades of angry, settled on a deep crimson, and then she did something I hadn't anticipated. She turned toward the stream of card-carrying residents, spotted someone she recognized, and immediately pivoted from arguing with security to calling in reinforcements. "Wang Ji. Over here." A big guy separated from the crowd and walked over. 6 feet tall, broad shoulders, dark jacket, the kind of build that suggested he either worked construction or had a very serious gym membership. He looked at me, looked at the woman, Xiaoli, apparently, and assessed the situation. "What's the problem?" "This guard won't let me in." She pointed at me with the righteous fury of a woman who'd been denied entry to her own home by a 20-year-old stranger with a rubber baton. Wang Ji tried the diplomatic route, pulled out a cigarette, offered me one. The universal male negotiation tool. "Hey brother, smoke?" "No thanks." His hand hung in the air for an awkward beat before retracting. He cleared his throat and switched to verbal persuasion. "She's my neighbor. Building 12, Unit 2, Apartment 506. You can look it up. She's been living here for years. Just forgot her card today. Cut her some slack." I stared at him without blinking. He shifted his weight uncomfortably. "Seriously, she's a real resident. I can vouch for her." I waited until he was done, then delivered my line with the warmth of a frozen fish. "Gate's broken. Can't help you." The smile died on his face like a candle in a hurricane. He looked at the gate, very obviously not broken, given that dozens of people had just swiped through it without issue. Then he looked at the perfectly functional turnstile. Then back at me. You could see the gears turning in his head, the slow realization that the gate is broken was not a mechanical problem, but a philosophical position. He stood there in silence for several seconds, trying to figure out how to argue with someone who'd clearly decided that reality was optional. Behind him, Xiaoli's arms were still crossed, foot tapping. In front of him, I sat there with the serene confidence of a man who had 2 skeletons under his bed, a wrench in his backpack, and absolutely zero intention of opening anything for anyone. The horror game wanted me to play security guard? Fine. I'd be the worst, or best, depending on perspective, security guard this apartment complex had ever seen. Nobody gets in. Nobody gets past. The gate is broken, the door is closed, and I don't care how many neighbors vouch for you. Welcome to the West Gate. It's closed. Forever. Wang Ji did not take rejection well. Getting shut down by a 20-year-old security guard in front of a pretty neighbor was apparently his personal nightmare scenario. He marched into my booth, slammed his palm on the desk like he was in a crime drama, and delivered his best tough guy line. "Open the gate. Now, don't make me use force. Those skinny arms of yours would snap pretty easy." Cute. Really cute. The man was trying to intimidate someone who'd cracked a 400-pound pig demon's skull open 3 days ago with a 10-pound revenge wrench. But he didn't know that. All he saw was a scrawny young security guard who needed to be taught a lesson about customer service. I picked up the electric baton, my souvenir from the pig fight, the one with the paralysis effect, and flicked the switch. Blue lightning crackled between the prongs, filling the dim booth with flickering light and a sound like angry bees having a seizure. I didn't stand up, didn't raise my voice, just sat there, taser buzzing in my hand, and smiled at him. "Want to try me?" The gulp he produced was audible from across the room. I watched his entire decision-making process play out on his face in real time. Step 1. Realize this guard brought his own electric weapon to work. Step 2. Realize this guard is absolutely unhinged enough to use it. Step 3. Calculate the humiliation of explaining to co-workers that he got tasered by a security guard because he was white knighting for his attractive neighbor. Step 4. Strategic retreat. He puffed up his chest one last time for appearances. You've got nerve, kid. I'm going straight to your manager. Then he turned and speed-walked out of the booth so fast he was practically jogging. Outside, Xiaoli was waiting with hopeful eyes. Wang Jiyi's face turned the color of a tomato. He admitted he was wrong. But the gate really is broken. Maybe try another entrance. He didn't wait for her response. Just mumbled, I've got somewhere to be, and practically dove through the card turnstile. Xiaoli wasn't stupid. She watched her champion flee the battlefield without a backward glance and knew exactly what had happened. She stamped her foot, called me a dead security guard under her breath, and stormed off into the night. Peace at last. What I was starting to understand was that the horror game had designed this dungeon to pressure players from every angle. Refusing entry didn't just mean turning away ghosts. It meant dealing with increasingly aggressive humans who had perfectly legitimate reasons to get in and absolutely no patience for a security guard who decided the concept of opening a gate was philosophically beneath him. The game wanted to force confrontations. It wanted players to feel pressured into letting people through, increasing the chances of accidentally admitting something wearing a human costume. Nobody gets in strategy was safe in theory, but the social warfare required to maintain it was genuinely exhausting. Meanwhile, across the complex, the other 3 guards were having their own adventures. East Gate Zhao Yuanxi had gone full open-door policy. Both gates wide open, feet up on the desk, not even pretending to check anyone. His strategy was pure statistics. More humans than ghosts meant net positive points no matter what slipped through. The man was playing poker with monster identification and betting everything on probability. The North and South Gate players were doing it properly, checking registrations, asking questions, cross-referencing with neighbors. Careful, methodical, terrified they'd make a mistake. Honestly, the most reasonable approach, but also the most stressful. The initial rush hour ended around 7:15. The last card-carrying resident swiped through, and the street went empty. Dead quiet. No footsteps, no traffic, no voices. Just darkness pressing against the edges of my booth's fluorescent glow. The real test was about to begin. During the rush, there were always other people around to cross-reference identities. Now, anyone who showed up would be alone. No witnesses. No one to confirm or deny who they were. Just me, my taser, and whatever decided to come knocking. My stomach growled loud enough to echo off the booth walls. Right. The old guard had mentioned dinner in the microwave. I found it. A packed meal, 2 vegetable dishes, and 1 meat. Not bad for dungeon catering. It was cold, so I popped it in the microwave and hit start. The machine hummed. I stood with my back to the door, watching the little turntable spin, thinking about nothing more complicated than whether the meat dish was pork or chicken. Under the bed, Xiao Zhang and Xiao Wang suddenly moved. I heard the faintest rattle of bones on the floor, not their usual restless shifting, but something deliberate. Urgent. I glanced down. Both skeletons had their bony fingers extended, pointing in perfect unison at something directly behind me. I didn't turn around to look first. Didn't hesitate. Didn't ask questions. I grabbed the electric baton off the counter, thumbed the switch, and spun around swinging. A hunched old man was standing right there, inside my booth. Less than 2 feet away. He'd crept in without making a single sound. No footsteps, no breathing, no door creak, nothing. Silent as death itself, because he probably was death itself, or at least death's creepy uncle. His eyes were fixed on the desk where the gate remote control sat, and his wrinkled hand was reaching for it. He'd been trying to steal the remote and open the gate himself while my back was turned. The baton connected with his midsection and 50 points of supernatural electrical discharge did the rest. Blue lightning erupted across his body. He screamed, a high, sharp wail that definitely didn't sound like any normal old man, and crumpled to the floor like a marionette with cut strings, twitching and convulsing, limbs jerking in directions that seemed slightly wrong for human anatomy. I stood over him, baton still crackling, heart hammering. Microwave still spinning cheerfully behind me. He was curled up on the ground, clutching the gate remote he'd managed to grab on his way down. First lesson of ghost security work: never turn your back on the door. Second lesson: skeleton employees make the best motion detectors. Third lesson: electric batons solve most problems. The microwave beeped. Dinner was ready. I had a twitching intruder on my floor, a stolen remote to recover, and a 12-hour shift stretching ahead of me into the darkness. I stepped over the old man and grabbed my meal. Priorities. I crouched down and pried the gate remote out of the old man's twitching fingers, stuffing it safely into my pocket. Can't have unauthorized gate openings on my watch. But as I was about to stand up, a tooltip flickered over his shirt. Unwashed face mask. 50 in energy. Covered in drool from years of being worn over the face. 50 points. On what I thought was a shirt. Except it wasn't a shirt, it was apparently a face mask disguised as outerwear. The disgustingness of that description was profound, but 50 in energy was 50 in energy. My hand was already reaching for it when my brain caught up with my body and I froze mid-grab. I was about to strip an unconscious elderly person on the floor of a security booth. Even by the extremely flexible moral standards I developed since entering this horror game, this felt like a line. A blurry line, sure, and one I was absolutely willing to cross, but not personally. That's what employees are for. I looked under the bed. 2 pairs of blue ghost flame eyes stared back at me from the darkness like the world's creepiest nightlights. Good work earlier, you two. Now get out here and take his clothes off. Xiao Zhang and Xiao Wang crawled out from under the bed with the enthusiasm of skeletons who'd been waiting for exactly this kind of assignment. They positioned themselves on either side of the old man and started tugging at his clothes like 2 dogs fighting over a chew toy. They had zero concept of human decency, which made them perfect for the job. They were mid-strip when the old man's fingers twitched. Then a voice rang out. Young, sharp, furious, completely wrong for the elderly body on the floor. Let go of me. I looked at the old man's face. His lips hadn't moved. The voice wasn't coming from him. It was coming from inside him. Or more accurately, from behind him. I frowned. Rip it off. Don't worry about damage. My skeleton crew grabbed both sides of the shirt mask whatever and yanked in opposite directions. The fabric tore apart with a satisfying rip, and what I saw underneath made me jump backwards so fast I nearly tripped over the desk chair. Attached to the old man's bony back, literally fused to it, hands and feet melted into the skin like some kind of biological backpack, was a dwarf. A tiny, angry, very much conscious humanoid creature with its limbs grafted onto the old man's spine. Only its head could move freely, and right now that head was swiveling toward me with eyes full of pure murder. You're dead, it shrieked. The dwarf's cheeks inflated like a bullfrog preparing to croak. I'd seen enough anime to recognize a charging attack when I saw one. This little freak was about to unleash some kind of sonic scream, and judging by the supernatural energy building in its face, getting hit would probably scramble my brain like eggs in a blender. Unfortunately for the dwarf, its attack had the longest wind-up animation I'd ever witnessed. Those cheeks ballooned for a solid 2 seconds before anything came out, which in combat time was basically standing still with a sign that said, "Please hit me." I jabbed the electric baton straight into its face mid-inhale. Crack. Blue lightning. The dwarf's eyes rolled back, and it slumped against the old man's back, unconscious again. Total elapsed time from threat detection to neutralization, about 4 seconds. My electric baton was rapidly becoming my favorite possession. Forget the revenge wrench. This thing was compact, rechargeable, and apparently effective against supernatural parasitic dwarfs. Every home should have one. That wind-up was so long I could have made a sandwich, I muttered, flicking residual sparks off the baton. With the creature confirmed as definitively non-human, because humans generally don't have smaller humans fused to their spinal columns, I felt zero guilt about looting the rest. I had my skeletons flip the whole grotesque 2-in-1 package over and search thoroughly. The only other item of value was a jade archer's ring on the old man's thumb. 15 in energy points. Not great, but I wasn't in a position to be picky. Between the face mask and the ring, that was 65 points from one encounter. The guard booth was already paying dividends. Then a thought struck me with the force of divine inspiration. I looked at the unconscious dwarf man combo on my floor, then at Xiao Zhang and Xiao Wang standing over it like proud cats who'd caught a particularly ugly mouse. Can you two absorb Yin energy directly from this thing's body? They both nodded so hard I thought their skulls might detach. Turns out they'd already started sipping. The dwarf was barely fierce ghost level, weaker than either of them at full power. While conscious, a ghost could resist having its energy drained. But knocked out? It was an all-you-can-eat buffet with no bouncer. I pointed to the corner. Drag it over there and drink up. But then a practical concern surfaced. If it wakes up, can you handle it? They shook their heads, then nodded, then shook again. The skeleton version of, it's complicated. This was exactly why I needed a translator. I snapped my fingers. Summon skeleton. Ajuan. My military strategist materialized in the middle of the guard booth, notebook already in hand, ready for duty before his feet even touched the ground. The territory could survive without him for a while. Mustache Chef was there. And unless the well started doing something weirder than sighing, nothing was going to happen. Translate for me. What are they trying to say about controlling that thing? Ajuan conferred with the two soldiers in their bone-clacking language for about 2 minutes, then turned back to me with the answer. They say that while the creature still has significant Yin energy, they can't overpower it. But once they've drained enough, they'll be able to keep it subdued. Made sense. Drain the battery first, then the device can't fight back. But Ajuan wasn't finished. My lord, there's actually a better option. His eye flames flickered with what I was learning to recognize as excitement. You could send this creature back to the territory. At its level, I can suppress it easily. And here's the interesting part. After we drain its Yin energy completely, it will slowly regenerate over time. The process takes months, but it means we could drain it again. And again, indefinitely. He paused to let that sink in. However, this only works with weak entities. If you sent back something powerful enough to overpower us, it could seize control of the territory entirely. I stared at him, then at the unconscious dwarf, then back at him. Are you telling me, I said slowly, that I can kidnap ghosts, bring them home, and use them as renewable energy sources? Ajuan tilted his skull slightly. That is an accurate summary. Yes, a living battery. A ghost battery. Capture low-level supernatural creatures. Haul them back to the territory. Drain their Yin energy. Wait for them to recharge. Drain them again. Repeat forever. Passive income. Renewable ghost energy. My territory's financial problems weren't just solvable. They were about to become a non-issue, assuming I could maintain a steady supply of kidnapped spirits. The skeleton mortgage, the daily upkeep costs, the building upgrades, the army revival fees. All of it could be funded by a basement full of captive ghosts slowly leaking Yin energy like supernatural batteries plugged into the world's most unethical charging station. I looked at the dwarf creature on my floor with entirely new eyes. This wasn't an enemy. This wasn't a threat. This was my first piece of infrastructure. Employee number 5. Involuntary, unconscious, and about to spend the next few months zip-tied to a wall in a skeleton graveyard, powering my empire one slow drip of ghost juice at a time. I grinned the grin of a man who had just invented the ghost energy industry. Send it home. Tell the chef to keep an eye on it. Just tell me how to do it, I said, already mentally filing the dwarf creature under company assets in my brain's accounting department. Ajuan's warning about not capturing anything too powerful was noted and immediately filed under. Yeah, obviously. I wasn't about to kidnap a ghost king and bring it home to my cardboard kingdom. My territory could barely handle a cooking lesson. The last thing it needed was an angry high-level spirit breaking free and evicting everyone. My risk tolerance had firm limits, and those limits were set at things my skeletons can sit on without getting thrown off. The procedure was beautifully simple. When I sent Ajuan back to the territory via recall, he just needed to be physically touching the creature. As long as the target couldn't resist, meaning knocked out, drained, or otherwise incapacitated, it would get dragged along for the ride. Like checking luggage on a flight, except the luggage was a parasitic ghost dwarf and the flight was a teleportation beam to a skeleton graveyard. How much Yin energy can we get out of this thing? I asked, because everything in my life now revolved around ghost juice economics. Ajuan estimated around 200 points. 200. From one creature. To put that in perspective, I'd spend an entire bus ride crawling on my hands and knees unzipping seat covers for 15 points each. 5 seat covers equaled 75 points and about 45 minutes of my dignity. This single unconscious dwarf was worth almost 3 times that, and it would recharge over time. Slowly. Months, Ajuin said, but it would regenerate its energy naturally, at which point we could drain it again. And again. And again. Forever. An eternal ghost battery plugged into my territory's power grid, producing free energy while my skeletons stood guard over it like the world's most terrifying power plant employees. We should move fast before it wakes up, Ajuin advised, which was the most practical thing anyone had said to me all day. He grabbed the dwarf by the back of its neck. The thing dangled limply from his bony hand like a wet towel. I activated the recall. A flash of dark light pulsed through the booth, and both of them vanished. Delivered. 1 skeleton strategist and 1 involuntary renewable energy source. Express shipped to the skeleton tomb, care of Mustache Chef, who was about to get a very confusing new roommate. Xiao Zhang and Xiao Wang watched Ajuin disappear with expressions I can only describe as devastated. Their eye flames literally dimmed. They'd been happily sipping energy from the unconscious dwarf like 2 kids sharing a milkshake, and I'd just sent the milkshake to another zip code. They looked at the empty spot where the dwarf had been, then at me, then at the empty spot again. If skeletons could pout, these 2 were doing it with their entire skeletal systems. I had no way of understanding the depth of their disappointment because their communication method, frantic jaw clacking and vague arm gestures, couldn't convey, we were finally going to feel full for the first time in decades, and you ripped it away from us in under 5 minutes. Some emotions are just too complex for charades. Back under the bed, I ordered. They obeyed immediately, sliding beneath the mattress with the silent obedience of soldiers who knew their place, even when their place was cramped, dark, and devoid of ghost snacks. Finally, I could eat my dinner. The microwave meal had been sitting there getting cold during my entire encounter with the dwarf man, the impromptu ghost autopsy, the clothing removal ceremony, and the interdimensional prisoner transfer. I pried open the lid. Green pepper beef stir-fry. Lukewarm at best, but the salt and oil had soaked in nicely. I shoveled food into my mouth with the mechanical efficiency of a man who'd been hungry for too long and had too many supernatural distractions. While eating, I examined my electric baton more carefully. This thing had single-handedly won me 2 fights tonight, and it was rapidly becoming the MVP of my entire horror game career. The wrench was powerful but weighed 10 pounds and required a running start. The clearance knife was useless against ghosts. But this baton? Compact, effective against supernatural creatures, and apparently devastating to parasitic dwarves with long attack animations. One problem though, the battery was running low. Maybe 2 more full power zaps left before it died completely. And I had no charger. I checked the charging port. Type-C. At least the pig demon had modern taste in electronics. Tomorrow when the old guard came back for his shift, I tried to borrow a cable. Until then, every zap counted. Conservation mode activated. I tracked him on the camera feed for a few seconds, then took another sip of water. My water was cold now. Look, I understood the situation. That player had accidentally let in a non-human and was about to lose 20 points if he didn't chase it down and drive it out. Every minute it stayed inside the complex was a minute closer to permanent point deduction. He was scared, running alone into a dark residential area after a shadow monster, armed with a flashlight and a tiny bell. It was objectively a terrible position to be in.